Because Baiye achieved an S+ rating in the previous dungeon, Eternal Night, lost manor in the mist. Therefore, he can now match himself with any dispatch mission in this world according to his own needs. Of course, he can also choose to enter this world at any time to explore and gather information in advance. In this way, the difficulty of selecting and matching relevant dispatch missions in this world will undoubtedly be reduced significantly. However, Baiye didn't do that. Instead, he clicked on random matching, hoping to be matched with a world with a cultivation theme as soon as possible. Of course, before that, he needed to make some preparations. First, he expanded his inventory by 10 slots, which cost him 55 silver coins. He then began making arrangements based on the most popular resource preparation methods found on the mission dispatch forum. He placed food in the first slot to ensure basic survival supplies. So he spent 2 gold coins to buy 10 vials of nutrient solution that could quickly provide players with a large amount of nutrients. The second slot is for tools to deal with various emergencies. Baiye even spent 20 silver coins to buy a multifunctional toolbox, which contains only 0-level common items and takes up only 1 backpack slot. The third slot was suitable for placing more supplies to further ensure an ample supply of survival resources. He spent another gold coin to buy some extraordinary food that could replenish a large amount of stamina and satiety. The fourth slot is designated as a spare weapon slot, where Baiye can equip the soul-slaying blade, the Crying Blood Rose. The fifth slot was used to replenish food, but it was best to avoid using extraordinary food. So Baiye simply cooked a pot of rice and threw it in. The rest was still arranged according to the priority of replenishment. This combination ensures basic survivability even in situations where the game only allows 10, 5, 3, or even just 1 inventory slot to be opened. The reason Baiye entered the dungeon unprepared last time was because he had no other options. He figured he was just a useless person and might as well die. But now that he has a dungeon exit ticket as a safety guarantee, not restricted by inventory slots, he needs to prepare properly. So he used most of the remaining money to buy enough supplies, and incidentally kept the soul-eating cat's core, teeth, moonlight grass solution recipe, and even the soul reincarnation record. He also kept some of the best quality medicines, as there were some left over. In case he encounters trouble and even the dungeon exit ticket doesn't work, these items can still fetch a good amount of money for Su Lei. After Baiye clicked the match dispatch option, his figure disappeared from the room again. Ding, player Moonlight Wanderer has been detected as having initiated a mission and has been teleported to the mission location, Strange Tales of the Abandoned Hospital. Dispatch location: Strange Tales and Bizarre Events. Task type: Exploration. Mission mode: Single player. Recommended level: LV11-LV13. Task duration: 12 hours. Time flow ratio is 1:1 with reality. Mission brief. 3 years ago, St. Mary's Mental Hospital was shut down for illegal human experimentation, but was subsequently shrouded in a strange fog, completely isolating it from the outside world. Anyone who enters the fog loses their way and disappears without a trace. Now, the hospital has become a dangerous labyrinth filled with unknown and terrifying entities. Mission objective: you will enter this abandoned hospital to explore its secrets. Your goal is to find 8 pieces of evidence related to human experimentation within the hospital and successfully escape this instance. Basic rewards: 1000 EXP, 8 gold, 1 random Efrank treasure chest. The teleportation was as smooth as ever. The moment Baiye regained consciousness and opened his eyes, a desolate and dilapidated scene came into view. Baiye stood at the entrance of the abandoned hospital, surrounded by thick fog, as if the whole world was shrouded in a gray veil. A damp, musty smell permeated the air, mixed with a faint metallic odor sending chills down one's spine. The St. Mary's Mental...
Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
Hospital before us has long lost its former grandeur, leaving only dilapidated exterior walls and rickety windows. The hospital's architecture is ancient and eerie, with its pointed towers appearing and disappearing in the mist, like a giant monster lurking in the fog, ready to devour any intruder. Vines climbed all over the walls, their withered leaves swaying gently in the wind, making a rustling sound like some kind of whisper. The hospital gate was half open, the iron gate was rusty, and the broken chain on the gate hung on the ground. The steps in front of the door were covered with cracks, and weeds grew in the gaps as if no one had set foot on them for many years. Looking up at Baiye, he saw that most of the hospital windows were broken, with shards of glass scattered all over the ground. Occasionally, a few remaining pieces of glass made a slight clanging sound in the wind, like the low murmur of a ghost. Taking advantage of the relatively safe few minutes at the start of the game, Baiye quickly checked the dungeon information. However, when he saw LV11 tilde LV13 written in the recommended level column, he almost couldn't help but curse. This game is a piece of junk. I'm only level 10. How did I get matched with level 11 to 13 dungeons? And his inventory once again. It wasn't that everything was banned. It was just that due to the world setting of this instance, Baiye disabled all extraordinary equipment and items in his inventory. This includes but is not limited to staves, soul-slaying blades, life potions, mana potions, energy potions, and even extraordinary food supplies. Fortunately, this situation was mentioned in a general guide that Baiye had seen online. So the multi-tool kit and large pot of rice he prepared before coming in were actually quite useful. He really is a genius. Immediately afterwards, Baiye tried magic again. Well, this time the system only disabled the extraordinary equipment and items but did not disable his magic. However, the elemental content of this world is pitifully low, much like a world without extraordinary beings, where only some basic elements that constitute the world exist. Without any elemental replenishment or magic potions to supply him, Baiye's magic power is dwindling with every use, so he dares not use it recklessly. Fine. So you're targeting me, aren't you? Baiye took a B***G razor from his inventory. He had no choice but to return to being a swordsman once again. He glanced at the B***G knife in his hand, its blade only about 20 centimeters long. He seemed more like an assassin now. This B***G knife was the same one he took from the kitchen in the Misty Manor dungeon. Thinking back, he actually considered throwing this guy away. Tusk, that was so wrong of him. Speaking of the fog. Tusk, this dungeon is shrouded in mist again. Am I just destined to encounter mist, or has the author simply run out of ideas? While inwardly cursing, Baiye plunged the tip of the B***G knife into the lock of the security room at the hospital entrance. A burst of knife intent erupted, instantly destroying the lock's structure. With a click, he opened the door to the security room and then began quickly rummaging through its contents. A tattered camouflage backpack, good stuff. His own backpack slots aren't big enough, this thing will allow him to carry some items. Personnel registration form, take a look, a flashlight. 3 years have passed, it's completely unusable now. A rubber baton. This thing can probably be used as a backup weapon. I'll throw it into the side of my backpack. Hospital distribution map. I need to memorize this carefully, it will probably save me a lot of time exploring. Finally, after breaking into a drawer, Baiye discovered a large bunch of keys inside. Holy crap, a legendary golden item. Wait, I mean the key item. Baiye was truly astonished that the security guard could have left such a large bunch of keys here. With this thing, he could probably open almost every door in this hospital, right? Never mind, just take it. After searching the security room, Baiye took out a mechanical pocket watch and glanced at the time. About 10 minutes had passed since the dungeon started. It was about time to go in. The sky over St. Mary's Mental Hospital had just darkened, but by the bright moonlight, he could still see the complex of buildings in front of him clearly. The main building has 12 floors, the annex and laboratory building are both 9 floors. And there is also a rehabilitation center, with an estimated area of between 30,000 and 50,000 square meters. This hospital is so big, can I explore it all in 12 hours? Baiye muttered something to himself and walked into the building directly opposite the hospital entrance. Although the flashlight he found in the security room was out of power, it wasn't a big problem for Baiye. With his senses, he was already able to see in the dark, relying almost entirely on the reflection of moonlight. Furthermore, he also had a tactical flashlight in his multi-tool kit, but there was no need to take it out now, lest it alert something in the hospital. The system says it needs to find 8 pieces of evidence, but the concept of evidence is too general. It could be paper documents, experimental records, surveillance videos, or even some kind of living organism, such as an experimental subject or someone with inside knowledge. Finding 8 pieces of evidence, plus an important research report, in such a large hospital with only 12 hours is undeniably a difficult task. Baiye stood in the center of the hospital's main lobby looking around. The dilapidated corridor stretched into the darkness, the peeling paint and flaking wallpaper on the walls making the entire space seem even more sinister. An indescribable stench permeated the air as if something was rotting in the shadows. I need to find a place where the clues are concentrated, Baiye muttered to himself. He quickly reviewed the hospital layout he had seen in the security room in his mind: archives, laboratories, the director's office, wards. These were the places most likely to contain evidence. He decided to start with the archives. The archives typically store various hospital documents, including patient records and laboratory data, making them one of the most likely places to find evidence. Baiye carefully made her way up the stairs and down the corridor, the floorboards creaking under her feet as if they might collapse at any moment. His senses were fully activated, constantly alert to any movement around him. Although his magic power was limited, his perception was not restricted, allowing him to detect potential dangers in the dark. Suddenly, he stopped in his tracks. A slight noise came from around the corner of the corridor ahead, like something being dragged across the floor. Baiye held his breath, gripped the B***G knife tightly, and slowly approached the corner. When he peered over, he found the place empty except for a pool of dark red liquid seeping from the corner of the wall and slowly flowing down the floor. An illusion or some kind of trap, Baiye frowned, not daring to approach rashly. He avoided the puddle of liquid and continued toward the archives. A dozen minutes later, he arrived at a heavy, hard plastic door on the third floor. A rusty metal plaque hung on the door, on which the words archives could still be faintly discerned. Baiye tried pushing the door, only to find it locked. He took out the set of keys he had found in the security room and began searching for the key. Disappointingly, the security office is not authorized to hold keys to important places like the archives. So Baiye had no choice but to resort to a clumsy method. He inserted the tip of his B***G razor into the keyhole, and a faint burst of blade intent erupted once more. Click. Baiye pushed open the door, and a smell of old paper and mildew hit her. The archive room was pitch black, with only a small area illuminated by the faint moonlight filtering through the broken window. Fortunately, Baiye possesses night vision, allowing him to see even in such dim lighting conditions. The archives were filled with filing cabinets and scattered papers, clearly having been ransacked during the raid 3 years ago. Baiye walked quickly to the nearest filing cabinet and began searching through it. Patient records, lab logs, financial reports, he muttered to himself as he flipped through the pages. Suddenly, his gaze fell upon a yellowed folder with the words Special Experiment Project Record written on the cover. Found it? Baiye was overjoyed and quickly opened the folder, his eyes scanning the contents of the file. The folder is titled Special Experiment Project Li Jiangguo Research Group, and the experimental subjects are codenamed Dream Weavers. The experiment's objective is stated as, through brain nerve stimulation and drug intervention, to unleash the latent evolutionary potential of humanity, break through existing physiological limits, and achieve the sublimation and evolution of human consciousness. Baiye frowned and continued reading. The record of the experiment was rather brief, as if several key pages had been removed. However, from the remaining information, Baiye still managed to piece together some details. The main subject of the experiment, the Dream Maker, was a young girl about 14 years old. Unlike the other test subjects, she was unusually cooperative. However, the other test subjects resisted fiercely, exhibiting severe physiological rejection reactions, and some even died due to the experiment's failure. The research team attempted to activate the potential of the test subjects through brain surgery, drug injections, and some unknown consciousness intervention method. Besides, most of the key information was deliberately removed, leaving Baiye with no way of knowing what abilities this Dream Weaver possessed or why she was chosen as the primary experimental subject. The experimental results were also incomplete, but the last few lines caught Baiye's attention. The experimental results were deeply disappointing. While the Dream Weaver demonstrated some of the expected capabilities, we lacked crucial missing information. The experiment's ultimate goal was not achieved, possibly due to the lack of a core sample. It is recommended to terminate the project and destroy all related records. Baiye closed the folder, his brow furrowed. What's missing? What's the core sample? He muttered to himself, a feeling creeping into his mind that a deeper secret lay hidden behind this experimental record. Ding! Congratulations to player Moonlit Sky for finding one of the 8 pieces of evidence related to human experimentation at St. Mary's Mental Hospital, current progress 1/8. Upon hearing the system notification, Baiye was taken aback. This thing was indeed the so-called evidence. He put the folder into his backpack and continued searching in the archives. Soon, Baiye pulled out a stack of photos from the filing cabinet. The edges of the photos were yellowed, and there were some unidentified stains on the surface. He quickly flipped through the photos and found that it was a set of photographs recording changes in the experimental subjects. seemingly a video record of an experimental subject at different stages. The subject in the first photo is a young man who looks to be in his early 20s with delicate features and a hint of unease in his eyes. He was wearing a hospital gown and sitting in a chair with a hospital ward in the background. The bottom right corner of the photo is captioned, Experiment Subject 07, Initial State Day 1. In the second photograph, the appearance of the experimental subject begins to change. His skin turned pale, his eyes became vacant, and fine bluish-gray veins appeared on his face. His arm and leg muscles seemed more developed than before, but overall he still looked like an ordinary person. Photo caption. Subject 07, Day 7, Preliminary Reaction After Passing black doodle. The changes are more obvious in the third photo. The test subject's body began to swell, its muscles became abnormally developed, and its skin turned an unnatural bluish-gray. His facial features began to distort, his eyes bulged, and his teeth became sharp, as if the characteristics of some kind of wild beast were gradually emerging. Photo caption. Subject 07, Day 14, Phase II Reaction. In the fourth photo, the experimental subject has completely lost its human appearance. His limbs became long and twisted, and his fingernails and toenails became sharp like claws. Its skin was covered with dry, bluish-gray cracks, its eyes bulged and glowed red, and its teeth were sharp as serrations. His body had an odd proportion, as if it had been forcibly stretched, and even had several octopus tentacle-like body tissues growing out of it. Photo caption, Experimental Subject 07, Day 21, Final Form. In the last photo, the test subject is confined in a specially made metal cage, which is surrounded by high-voltage wires and monitoring equipment. The test subject's expression was ferocious. It seemed to be frantically pounding on the cage, trying to escape. Photo caption, Experiment Subject 07, Day 28, Out of Control, Destruction Recommended. After looking through the photos, Baiye felt a chill run down his spine. These photos clearly document how an ordinary person gradually transforms into a monster during an experiment. He quickly put the photo into his inventory, a sense of unease creeping into his mind. This thing must be the monster from this dungeon, right? It looks pretty strong. Ding! Congratulations to player Moonlit Sky for finding one of the 8 pieces of evidence related to human experimentation at St. Mary's Mental Hospital. Current progress 2/8. 6 more pieces of evidence are needed. Baiye muttered to himself, his gaze sweeping over the other corners of the archives. He decided to continue the search to see if he could find any more clues. Unfortunately, although the archives should theoretically be the place with the most evidence, after finding these 2 pieces of evidence, Baiye could no longer obtain any more useful information, and he wasted a lot of time as a result. 2 have been found, 6 more to go. Baiye glanced at the moon outside, quickly estimated the time, and realized that almost an hour had passed. Meanwhile, above St. Mary's Mental Hospital, 3 transport helicopters hovered above the thick fog, their rotors roar swallowed by the mist, sounding muffled and distant. Inside the cabin, 12 fully armed combat personnel are inspecting equipment. Their combat uniforms were uniformly dark gray, without any national or organizational markings. Instead, they featured complex symbols and numbers. Each person wore a tactical mask, revealing only a pair of cold eyes. Listen carefully, the mission objective is simple. Find the research report and remove all obstacles. In addition to the 12 fully armed personnel, a deep male voice came through a communicator from another helicopter. He had a striking red insignia on his shoulder, suggesting he was the commander of these mercenaries. Understood, the team members responded in unison, their voices carrying a chilling, killing intent. Remember, there may be unknown dangers in this hospital, don't let your guard down. The commander continued, if we encounter experimental subjects or other threats, eliminate them first. Our employers are only interested in that research report, everything else, leave no trace. At the commander's order, the cabin door slowly opened, and a cold night wind mixed with mist rushed in. The 12 mercenaries leaped out of the cabin one after another, like a flock of black falcons, plummeting straight to the ground. Their parachutes opened automatically when they were about 100 meters above the ground, and they landed silently on the hospital roof and the surrounding open ground. Upon landing, the mercenaries quickly assembled, dividing into 4 teams of 3, each infiltrating the hospital from different directions. Team C, enter from the east side target. The laboratory buildings. Team B, west side target, the intensive care unit of the annex building. Team A, enter through the main entrance, clear the main building area, and search the archives and the dean's office. As for Team D, their duties include searching the rehabilitation center and roaming the entire area. They are ready to provide support at any time. If the operation goes poorly, fire a signal flare into the sky and I will lead Team S to provide support. After the order was given, the mercenaries moved swiftly and efficiently, clearly demonstrating their experience as elite soldiers. They were well equipped, carrying not only standard assault rifles and pistols, but also explosive devices, flashbangs, and special weapons, seemingly prepared for the dangers posed by the hospital. However, they were unaware that the hospital was far more bizarre than they had imagined. Just as Team A approached the archives, one of the mercenaries suddenly stopped and whispered, "Captain, something's wrong." His voice came through the communicator to everyone's ears. Team A's captain quickly approached and, following the team member's gaze, saw that the door to the archives room was half open. The lock was broken, and there were some fresh footprints on the floor. "Someone got here before us." Team A's captain narrowed his eyes, a hint of wariness in his voice. "Be careful, it could be someone from the Huxia government, or it could be something else." Meanwhile, Team C had arrived at the laboratory area. The laboratory door was tightly closed, covered with rust and strange scratches. A mercenary attempted to blow open the door with an explosive device, but just as he was installing the explosives, a low growl suddenly came from inside. "Retreat," Team C's captain immediately ordered, but it was too late. The laboratory door was smashed open from the inside by a tremendous force, and a gigantic monster rushed out. Its skin was bluish-gray, its limbs were long and twisted, its eyes glowed red, and its teeth were sharp as serrations, exactly the kind of experimental subject that Baiye had seen in the photograph. "Fire," Team C's captain roared, and the mercenaries immediately pulled the triggers, bullets raining down like raindrops. However, the bullets only forced the monster to retreat, emitting a series of tearing roars. Dark red blood gushed out continuously, but the amount of bleeding was much less than that of a normal person hit by a bullet, and the person still did not fall after being shot more than a dozen times. "Damn it, bullets do limited damage to this thing," one of the mercenaries exclaimed. "Reload, maintain suppressive fire." Team C's captain calmly gave the order while simultaneously drawing a high-explosive grenade from his waist, releasing the pin and throwing it towards the monster. The grenade traced an arc in the air and landed precisely at the monster's feet. With a deafening roar, flames and smoke instantly engulfed the monster's figure. However, before the smoke had cleared, the monster burst out of the flames. Although its body was covered in charred wounds, its movements did not seem to be greatly affected. "Damn it, this thing is so troublesome," a mercenary said through gritted teeth, his assault rifle spitting fire again. "Don't stop firing." "Keep shooting," Team C's captain commanded as he pulled a specially made shotgun from his backpack. The magazine of this gun is filled with specially made armor-piercing rounds, designed specifically to engage heavily armored targets. Bang. Bang, bang, the roar of shotguns echoed in the corridor, each bullet hitting the monster's head or chest with pinpoint accuracy. The monster's body was forced back repeatedly, and dark red blood gushed continuously from its wounds. "Worked." "Continue," Team C's captain shouted. The mercenaries quickly adjusted their tactics, firing in pairs to ensure uninterrupted firepower. At the same time, another team member took out a Molotov cocktail from his backpack and threw it at the monster's feet. Boom! The incendiary bomb exploded instantly, engulfing the monster in scorching flames. The monster let out a shrill scream and struggled frantically, trying to extinguish the flames on its body. "Now, concentrate your firepower." Team C's captain seized the opportunity and ordered everyone to focus their firepower on the monster's head. Bullets rained down, riddling the monster's head with holes. Finally, it let out a defiant roar, its massive body crashing to the ground, utterly lifeless. "Target eliminated." Team C captain breathed a sigh of relief, glancing down at the shotgun in his hand. The magazine was empty. "How much ammunition did you use?" he asked, turning his head. "I have 2 magazines here plus a grenade." A team member quickly counted the remaining ammunition, his tone serious. "I have 1 magazine and 1 incendiary grenade here." After speaking, another team member hesitated. "Captain, this is only the first mutant, and it's already used up so much ammunition." "So do we." "Stop talking nonsense, aim more next time to save ammo and keep going." Team C's captain interrupted his teammate, his tone cold. "Our mission is to find the research report. No matter what happens, we must complete the mission." "Understood," the team members responded in unison, quickly organized their equipment, and continued to advance deeper into the laboratory. Meanwhile, Baiye, who had already left the archives, heard intense gunfire and explosions from the next building and cautiously lowered his body to sense the sounds. "Tisk. There are other people besides me who have come in. Is it a battle between the forces and monsters of this world?" Thinking of this, Baiye's lips twitched again, feeling a bit of a headache and tightness in his anus. Was this system thinking the dungeon difficulty wasn't enough, and was it still increasing the difficulty? Just from the intense gunfire, Baiye could tell that the enemy force consisted of at least 3 people, and their firepower was extremely fierce. Although his current attributes surpassed those of a normal human, taking bullets head-on. Well, forget about it. Inside the changing room, the air was thick with the pungent smell of blood and disinfectant, a nauseating combination. An investigator in a black uniform was huddled in a locker in the changing room. His left shoulder was ripped open with a deep, bone-revealing wound, and blood had soaked through his clothes, dripping from his fingertips onto the floor. His face was as pale as paper, and his breathing was weak and rapid, clearly indicating that he had lost too much blood. The faint sounds of gunfire and explosions outside made the cabinet tremble slightly. The investigator barely managed to lift his eyelids, his eyes revealing a hint of exhaustion and despair. "Not our people," he murmured, his voice almost inaudible. "Besides us, the higher-ups send in armed forces to die." The images of his 2 other colleagues flashed through his mind. One was a seasoned veteran investigator, and the other was a young girl who had been with the company for less than 2 years, but whose abilities had already surpassed his own. The 3 of them had originally been traveling together, but shortly after entering the hospital they were separated by some unknown force. "Old Zhang, little Chen, are you still alive?" A wave of bitterness and worry washed over him. He knew that the hospital was full of danger, and those experimental subjects were not people that ordinary people could handle. Even though all 3 of them were highly trained investigators with abilities far exceeding those of ordinary people, they still appeared utterly powerless when faced with the onslaught of numerous monsters. If it were them, perhaps they've already been killed by those monsters. His thoughts abruptly stopped, and he dared not think any further. The gunfire outside gradually faded into the distance, as if the 2 sides had moved to different locations. The investigator took a deep breath, trying to calm himself down. He knew he was in no condition to move, let alone find his companions. "I must live." He gritted his teeth, used his last bit of strength to pull a syringe from his pocket, and injected it into his arm with trembling hands. "If we can just hold on until dawn, maybe there's still a chance." His consciousness gradually faded, and the scene before him began to darken. Before he completely lost consciousness, only one thought remained in his mind. "I hope they're safe." Baiye held his breath and moved lightly through the hospital corridors, trying to speed up his search to ensure that he could complete the search for 8 pieces of evidence within the mission's time limit. Gunshots and explosions could still be faintly heard in the distance, but he had no intention of approaching. "Now is not the time to join in the fun," he muttered to himself, gripping the B*****G knife tightly in his hand, the blade gleaming coldly in the dim light. He quickly adjusted his course of action, deciding to move away from the source of the gunfire and continue searching for evidence. Since 2 pieces of evidence can be found in the main building's archives, could they also be found in other places, such as the doctor's office or treatment room? Soon Baiye arrived at a door with a sign that read Psychological Research Lab. Baiye pushed open the door and found the room in complete disarray, with documents scattered all over the floor and tables and chairs overturned, clearly indicating that it had been ransacked during a raid 3 years ago. He quickly began searching, pulling open drawers, checking filing cabinets, and even lifting the carpet. However, apart from a few unimportant medical records and some yellowed newspapers, he found nothing. "Tusk, looks like there's nothing useful here." Baiye frowned, and just as he was about to leave, his gaze was suddenly drawn to a document on the table. It was a doctor's schedule. The paper was yellowed, but the handwriting was still clearly visible. Baiye picked up the schedule and quickly glanced at it. Monday to Wednesday, Li Jiangguo, Chief Physician. Thursday to Friday, Wang Lihua, Associate Chief Physician. Saturday to Sunday, Zhang Wei, Attending Physician. Li Jiangguo, Wang Lihua, Zhang Wei. Baiye murmured these names, silently memorizing them. If I remember correctly, the first piece of evidence I found seemed to include the name Li Jiangguo. After noting down the 3 names, Baiye continued on to the next location. The corridors of the ward area were even more gloomy, with a putrid smell permeating the air. Baiye pushed open the doors of each ward, checking under the beds, in the cabinets, and even the ceiling, but still found nothing. "It seems there aren't any valuable clues in the ward area," he muttered to himself. Just as he appeared on the 6th floor, he suddenly heard a slight noise from upstairs. His body tensed instantly. He slightly raised the razor in his hand, glanced up, and made his judgment in just a moment. "Something is chasing us." The noise quickly disappeared as if it had never happened. Baiye frowned, not wanting to rush over and join the commotion, but instead quickly left the ward area. The pharmacy door was locked, but that wasn't a problem for Baiye. He easily pried open the lock with a B***G knife and pushed the door open. Baiye pushed open the door of the pharmacy, and a strong smell of medicine wafted out. The pharmacy was filled with various medicines and medical equipment, but most of them were expired or damaged. He quickly searched through them, hoping to find some useful clues. During the search, Baiye noticed a locked safe. He easily pried open the lock of the safe with a B***G knife and found a medicine dispensing record inside. He opened the notebook and quickly browsed through it. The notebook was filled with the names, quantities, and dates of the medicines issued. Suddenly, his gaze fell on one line of the record, drug name, chlorpromazine. Quantity shipped 5,000 mg. Outbound dates, March 15, 2022. Note for experimental use only, strictly prohibited from being distributed outside the laboratory. Chlorpromazine, Baiye frowned, secretly on guard. Although Baiye didn't know what most of the drugs were, he did recognize chlorpromazine. In his first life, one of his college roommates who had suffered from mental illness had mentioned it. This is a very well-known antipsychotic drug, mainly used to treat schizophrenia and other mental illnesses. However, this drug also has serious side effects, including muscle stiffness, tremors, and may even cause permanent neurological damage. Therefore, it is strictly controlled in many countries and is even listed as a prohibited drug, for experimental use only, strictly prohibited from being distributed outside. Baiye murmured softly, lost in thought. Ding. Congratulations to player Moonlit Sky for finding one of the 8 pieces of evidence related to human experimentation at St. Mary's Mental Hospital. Current progress 3/8. Baiye was stunned, huh? Is this also part of the evidence? But whatever, I'm lucky to have obtained some evidence by chance. He put the medicine dispensing record into his backpack and continued searching inside the pharmacy. However, apart from this record, he found no other valuable clues. It seems the pharmacy isn't a good place to gather clues. Baiye sighed, and just as he was about to leave, he suddenly noticed a locked safe in the corner. He quickly went over and used a B***G knife to pry open the lock of the safe, but it was empty, there was nothing inside. Tusk, what a waste of time. Baiye shook his head and turned to leave the pharmacy. After searching, Baiye found no other valuable clues besides the doctor's schedule and the drug dispensing records. He glanced at the time, nearly 2 hours had passed. 5 more pieces of evidence, time is running out. He muttered to himself, a hint of anxiety in his eyes. Just then, another burst of gunfire rang out in the distance, seemingly even more intense than before. Baiye frowned, becoming secretly on guard. Looks like those guys are still entangled with the monster. We need to hurry. He took a deep breath, composed himself, and continued deeper into the hospital. He slowly ascended the stairs, his footsteps so light they were almost inaudible. Suddenly, his ears twitched slightly as he caught the sound of hurried footsteps coming from upstairs. Dar does do. The footsteps were light and hurried, as if someone was running desperately. Immediately afterwards, another, heavier set of footsteps followed, accompanied by the thud of footsteps on the floor, as if some enormous creature was chasing after them. Someone's being chased, Baiye frowned, quickly assessing the situation. He didn't act rashly but quickly hid in the shadows at the corner of the stairs, held his breath, and waited quietly. Soon, a tall, slender figure rushed out. This is a female investigator. Her black uniform is soaked in blood, and the wound on her left arm is so deep that the bone is visible. Her fair skin has been torn open with a gruesome gash. Even so, her steps remain steady, her eyes gleaming with a sharp light. Swoosh. A dark shadow lunged at her from her left, bringing with it a stench of decay. The female investigator reacted with lightning speed, instantly spinning to the right, her right foot striking the floor tiles, and she slammed into the corridor wall like a bullet. Without the slightest hesitation, she drew a tactical dagger from her side, the sharp blade gleaming coldly in the dim light. The monster's outline finally appeared. It was a humanoid creature about 1.9 meters tall, with muscles bulging like rocks and skin that was a sickly bluish-gray. Its left arm was a thick tentacle, the tip of which split into 5 serrated tendrils, which was waving at an astonishing speed, trying to pin the female investigator to the wall. The female investigator moved with breathtaking speed. She leaned forward slightly, using the reaction force of the wall to spring up, and pounced on the monster's side like a cheetah. The dagger pierced precisely at the junction of the monster's shoulder blade and spine. However, the seemingly fragile skin and muscle were as hard as steel, leaving only a shallow cut. Bang! The monster suddenly swung its shoulder, sending the female investigator flying. She crashed heavily into an oxygen cylinder rack on the other side of the corridor. What's this? Baiye's heart skipped a beat. The other party didn't seem to be with those armed men. Could this instance actually be a 4-way free-for-all? Moreover, this female investigator is no ordinary person. Judging from her skills and resilience, her strength, physique, and agility should be higher than mine, and her life level has most likely reached the first stage. But when the female investigator got up again, her steps became unsteady, clearly indicating that she was exhausted. Her breathing was rapid, and a hint of despair shone in her eyes. Just then, the monster's footsteps grew closer, accompanied by a low roar. Roar. The test subject let out a roar and pounced on the girl, its sharp claws aimed straight for her back. Now, Baiye's heart skipped a beat. Although he still didn't understand what was going on, he still decided to save the girl. Perhaps he could glean some information from her. Soon, Baiye's figure emerged from the shadows like a ghost, moving so fast that his movements were almost invisible. His right foot suddenly rose, bringing a sharp gust of wind and kicked the test subject hard in the side. Bang. The experimental subject's massive body was sent flying by the sudden kick, crashing heavily into the wall with a dull thud. The tiles on the wall shattered instantly, scattering dust and rubble everywhere. The monster let out a painful roar and struggled to stand up, but Baiye was faster. He pounced on the monster like a cheetah, the razor blade in his hand flashing coldly in the dim light. The blade pierced the monster's throat with precision, the tip penetrating its tough skin and sinking into its flesh. Roar! The experimental subject let out a shrill scream, twisting its body wildly in an attempt to break free from Baiye's control. However, Baiye's movements did not pause at all. With a slight twist of his wrist, a sharp blade intent erupted from the blade, instantly severing the monster's neck bone.
Well, I've done it.
Dark red blood gushed out as the monster's head was cleanly severed and rolled onto the floor. Its massive body crashed to the ground, utterly lifeless. The entire battle took only a few seconds, so fast that it was almost impossible to react. Ding, you have killed a dungeon creature, a mutated level 12 normal unit, and gained 168 experience points. Although both were level 12 creatures, this mutant was significantly weaker than the elite unit Toby. So much so that he could easily kill it with just a B*****G knife. The female investigator stood there, stunned, her eyes filled with shock and disbelief. Her breathing was rapid and her chest heaved violently. She was clearly still reeling from the life-or-death crisis she had just experienced. How is this possible? She murmured softly, her voice trembling slightly. In her understanding, these experimental subjects possess strength, speed, and defense far exceeding that of ordinary people. Even for an investigator like herself, who had undergone genetic modification, victory would not be easy. However, the man before them so easily disposed of a test subject with just a B*****G knife. His movements were clean and efficient without the slightest hesitation, as if it were nothing more than a daily routine for him. Who are you? The female investigator finally came to her senses, her voice filled with a hint of awe and wariness. Baiye didn't answer her question. Instead, he gave her a cold look and asked in return, "Who are you? Why are you here?" His voice was deep and cold, carrying a strong sense of oppression. The razor blade twirled slightly in his hand, the dark red bloodstains still glaringly visible on its edge. The female investigator took a step back, her face turning pale, intimidated by his gaze. She bit her lip and quickly made a decision. She was already exhausted, while her opponent was fully stamina, and even if she were at her peak, she might not be able to beat him. So she said in a low voice, I'm Chen Yuxin. I'm an investigator sent by the authorities. We were assigned to come to this hospital during the day to investigate an experimental accident that happened 3 years ago. An official investigator. Baiye raised an eyebrow, about to mock the other party for daring to come in with such meager abilities, but a notification sound suddenly rang in his mind. Ding, congratulations to player Moonlit Sky. You have encountered an important figure, triggering a hidden quest. Find the 3 investigators sent by the official team to St. Mary's Mental Hospital and safely escort them out of the instance before dawn. Hidden quest? Baiye remained outwardly calm, but his heart was in turmoil. He never expected that encountering an official investigator would trigger a hidden quest. He frowned and said coldly, "Tell me what happened here and what the authorities' purpose was in sending you in." Upon hearing this, Chen Yuxin was somewhat surprised. "You didn't know." Before she could finish speaking, a scalpel flew past her cheek and embedded itself in the wall behind her. A few strands of hair fell, making her expression look extremely terrified. "Who taught you to answer questions with questions?" Chen Yuxin dared not waste any more words and quickly told him everything the other party wanted to know. Although as an official investigator she shouldn't have been so straightforward, Baiye's questions didn't involve any secrets. After the other party answered, Baiye asked a few more questions and finally pieced together the worldview of this instance world. It turns out that this world, like the world where Baiye's first life occurred, is also called Blue Star, and the year is 2023, probably in the summer. 11 years ago, in the year predicted by the Mayan civilization to be the end of the world, many horrifying and bizarre events occurred throughout the entire planet Earth. In North America, large-scale spatial distortions suddenly appeared in some remote towns in the western United States. After entering certain streets, people will inexplicably appear in the desert tens of kilometers away. When they tried to return to the original route, they found that the once familiar place was overgrown with weeds, and the original houses were now ruins, as if time and space had lost their control there. In Europe, on the Greek island of Santorini, volcanic lava has mysteriously solidified into strange shapes. It resembles a humanoid figure, yet is twisted and grotesque, and emits an eerie green glow at night. Whenever someone tries to approach it for research, a pitiful scream echoes across the beach, causing many researchers to go insane as a result. In some sea areas off Indonesia, Asia, waves hundreds of meters high can suddenly rise without warning. These waves form whirlpools that can instantly engulf any ships in the vicinity. Even more bizarrely, after the giant waves recede, the remains of huge, scaled creatures of unknown shape are often found, resembling fish but not quite. In Daxia, even more strange things have happened. In an ancient village in Henan, villagers have been hearing muffled drumbeats coming from underground for days, as if some enormous creature is awakening underground. Soon after, black mist began to gush from an ancient well in the village. Anyone who approached it felt short of breath and gradually lost strength, and then mysteriously disappeared, causing a sharp decline in the village's population. These bizarre events spread rapidly around the world, instantly casting a huge shadow of fear in the hearts of people in various countries and completely disrupting normal life. In response to these supernatural phenomena, various countries have established specialized investigation agencies. The investigation agency established by Daxia is called the Special Events Investigation Bureau, or simply the Special Investigation Bureau. It is subordinate to the Ministry of State Security of Daxia and aims to handle these extraordinary events secretly and professionally. The members of the Special Investigation Bureau are all elites from various industries and have undergone rigorous selection and training. They are proficient in various disciplines, from mysticism and astronomy to martial arts and psychological insight, and are skilled in everything. Furthermore, they possess a gene-enhancing agent developed from supernatural beings, granting investigators superhuman strength. The official investigation team's dispatch to this location is closely related to an incident that occurred 3 years ago. 3 years ago, St. Mary's Hospital was exposed for using mental patients for human experiments. Public pressure and outrage led to the swift closure of the hospital. However, the hospital did not find peace after being shut down. Instead, some strange rumors began to circulate, as if shrouded in a mysterious gloom. Some adventurous young people, driven by curiosity and a desire for excitement, sneaked into the hospital late at night. Soon after, some people claimed to have seen faint, eerie figures in the hospital corridors and wards. The image was of a patient wearing a hospital gown, but their movements were stiff and their body contorted, unlike that of a normal person. As time went on, these bizarre events did not deter adventurous young people. Instead, more people joined the exploration of the abandoned hospital. Later, some outdoor adventure streamers even went on adventures here and then disappeared without a trace, neither alive nor dead. A team of 5 elite criminal investigators entered the hospital to investigate a missing persons case, but they too soon vanished without a trace. The hospital at that time was shrouded in a thick, inescapable fog. The disappearance of the criminal investigation team finally prompted the Special Investigation Bureau to take the matter seriously, sending in a full-time investigator, a trainee investigator, and a support staff member to investigate. Speaking of her own abilities, Chen Yuxin looked helpless. She said sincerely, "There were 3 of us this time. Besides me and intern, there was an experienced full-time member and a logistics colleague a few years older than me. We were originally supposed to work together, but shortly after entering the hospital, we were separated by those monsters." A hint of fear flashed in her eyes and her body trembled slightly involuntarily. Interns. Even logistics staff have been sent in. Seemingly sensing Baiye's confusion, Chen Yuxin explained softly, "The Special Investigation Bureau is severely understaffed right now, so this is the only arrangement they can make. If something happens to us here, truly powerful individuals will enter and level this place." By saying this, the other party was also subtly telling Baiye that the Special Investigation Bureau had deep roots and enormous power, and hoped that he would not act rashly, otherwise it might bring him unimaginable trouble. Baiye frowned, ignoring the implicit threat, and continued, "Where was the last time you met? Did you agree on a meeting place?" Chen Yuxin shook her head, a hint of self-reproach in her voice. We originally planned to meet in the main building lobby, but those monsters appeared too suddenly. I was chased by 3 experimental subjects and had to escape here. I've already dealt with the other 2, but that left me exhausted. As for them, I don't know where they are now." Baiye paused for a moment, then continued, "Don't you have any communication equipment like walkie-talkies?" Chen Yuxin gave a bitter laugh, her voice tinged with helplessness. "I did bring it, but shortly after entering the hospital, we were attacked. My communicator was accidentally hit hard and is now unusable." "What is your goal?" Baiye continued to ask, his tone tinged with a hint of probing. Chen Yuxin hesitated for a moment, seemingly weighing whether she should reveal more information. But finally, she whispered, "Our primary task is to find the people who went missing here. Our secondary task is to locate an important research report. It said that this report records the entire process and results of a secret experiment conducted by the hospital 3 years ago, and may even involve how to mass-produce those test subjects." Baiye narrowed his eyes, a sense of unease creeping into his heart. "An important research report. Could this thing also be considered one of the 8 pieces of evidence? Do you know the exact location of the report?" he continued. Chen Yuxin shook her head. "We only know that the report might be hidden in the hospital director's office or an underground laboratory, but the exact location is still unclear." Suddenly, Baiye thought of something and asked Chen Yuxin, "Besides this, did you find anything else in the hospital, like the data from the experiment 3 years ago?" Chen Yuxin was taken aback, clearly not expecting Baiye to suddenly ask this. She frowned, a hint of doubt in her voice. Why are you looking for those documents? Hasn't the hospital been sealed off? What's the point of those things?" Baiye gave her a cold look, his tone tinged with impatience. "Stop talking nonsense and answer my question." Chen Yuxin took a step back, intimidated by his gaze. She bit her lip and whispered, I did find something. In the office of a doctor named Zhang Wei, I took a document. It was in the bag on my back." Baiye's gaze sharpened instantly. "Take it out." Chen Yuxin hesitated for a moment but finally nodded. She carefully took off her backpack, took out a yellowed folder and handed it to Baiye. Baiye took the folder and quickly opened it. The folder's cover reads Experimental Project Record, and it's signed Li Jiangguo Research Group at the end. It was filled with all sorts of experimental data and observation reports. His gaze swept quickly across the contents of the document, and his brows gradually furrowed. Experimental Subject 7, number T07, Basic Physiological Characteristics. Male, 35 years old, height 178 cm, weight 70 kg. Pre-experiment health status, mild schizophrenia patient with intermittent delusions. Experimental procedure. Inject the drug numbered X001 into the patient. The initial dose of the drug is 0.5 ml. Experimental procedure. About 3 hours after the injection, the subjects began to have a severe reaction, with muscle spasms throughout their bodies and a rapid rise in body temperature to 42 degrees C. 6 hours after the injection, the muscle tissue rapidly necrotized, starting from the extremities and gradually spreading to the trunk. During this time, the subject continuously emitted painful screams, accompanied by profuse sweating. 12 hours after the injection, almost all of the patient's muscle tissue had died, and black tissue resembling octopus tentacles had grown out. Experimental Subject 12, number T12. Basic Physiological Characteristics. Female, 28 years old, height 162 cm, weight 50 kg. Pre-experiment health status, no history of mental illness but had multiple suicidal tendencies. Experimental procedure. The drug numbered X002 was injected into the patient, with an initial dose of 0.3 ml. Experimental procedure. About 2 hours after the injection, the subject became abnormally excited, began running wildly in the laboratory, and started attacking the surrounding experimental equipment and instruments. 4 hours after the injection, its aggression increased, and its strength became astonishing, easily pushing away experimental equipment weighing 60 kg. At the same time, its eyes turned blood red, it completely lost its rationality, and began to indiscriminately attack everything around it. During the staff's attempt to stop her, the subject injured 3 security personnel. Her speed was almost unbelievable for a carbon-based life form. 8 hours after the injection, the skin and muscles throughout the body hardened like a mummy, and sharp nails grew out. Experimental Subject 15, number T15, Basic Physiological Characteristics. Male, 40 years old, height 182 cm, weight 80 kg. Pre-experiment health status. No mental illness, good physical condition, and prior military service. Experimental procedure. The drug numbered X003 was injected into the patient with an initial dose of 0.4 ml. Experimental procedure. About 1.5 hours after the injection, the subject began to show abnormal mental fluctuations and hallucinations. He claimed to see countless enemies rushing towards him. 3 hours after the injection, the subject successfully entered the redacted state. This process lasted approximately 2 hours. During this time, the subject kept muttering to themselves, and it was impossible to understand what they were saying. In the following days, due to unclear, he suffered a mental breakdown and exhibited severe self-harming behavior, repeatedly striking his head with his hands. Unclear. Experimental subject 19 no. T19 basic physiological characteristics. Male, 30 years old, height 175 cm, weight 65 kg. Pre-experiment health status, no mental illness, worked as a cleaner at a hospital. Experiment content, he was captured and used for experiments because he accidentally discovered a hospital's secret. The patient was injected with drug number X004 with an initial dose of 0.6 ml. Experimental procedure. Approximately 2.5 hours after the injection, the subject began to exhibit abnormal mental fluctuations and was able to manipulate black graffiti. It was initially judged that the subject was manipulating the surrounding energy or some intangible matter, but the specific form could not be determined due to incomplete experimental records. The experiment progressed smoothly, and the subjects were able to use this ability skillfully. However, it failed in the final stage due to a lack of core samples. The core sample should be a key element in the entire experiment. It may be the essence extracted from a special organism or substance. If it is missing, the subject will gradually lose control over the power being manipulated, ultimately leading to the failure of the experiment. After the initial failure, the subject was injected again with a special drug designated X005 at a dose of 1 ml. Following the injection, the subject fell into a deep coma. Core samples? Baiye murmured softly, feeling that these so-called core samples should be the key to solving the problem in the copy. Ding! Congratulations to player Moonlit Sky for finding one of the 8 pieces of evidence related to human experimentation at St. Mary's Mental Hospital, current progress 4/8. Baiye closed the folder, his gaze returning to Chen Yuxin. Have you read this document? Chen Yuxin shook her head, a hint of helplessness in her voice. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. I just got the documents when those monsters caught up with me. Baiye nodded and put the folder into his inventory. I'll keep this file for now, you don't mind, do you? Chen Yuxin gave a bitter laugh and said in a low voice, do I still have a choice? Baiye didn't answer. Instead, he used a scalpel to remove something from between the monster's eyebrows, then turned and walked down the stairs. Keep up, don't hold us back. Chen Yuxin barely kept up with him, but she was filled with doubt. Who exactly is this man? Unbeknownst to Chen Yuxin, while she was discussing Baiye internally, the latter was also muttering to himself. A level 12 investigator, and an elite unit at that. If she weren't exhausted, that mutant probably wouldn't have been able to defeat her. But I haven't sensed any extraordinary elements in this world. Could she be a genetically modified human? However, Baiye didn't dwell on these thoughts and led Chen Yuxin up the stairs, their steps light and swift. His senses were fully activated, and he was constantly alert to the movements around him. Chen Yuxin barely kept up with his pace. Although the wound on her left arm still throbbed with pain, she gritted her teeth and didn't make a sound. The 8th floor is the hospital ward area with rows of closed doors lining both sides of the corridor. Baiye pushed open one of the doors. The room was in a mess. The bed was overturned and the cabinets were overturned. It was clear that the room had been ransacked during the raid 3 years ago. He quickly searched every corner of the room, including under the bed, in the closets, and on the ceiling, but found nothing except a few worn-out hospital gowns and some insignificant personal belongings. It seems there's nothing useful here, Baiye said softly, then turned and left the room. Chen Yuxin followed behind him and asked in a low voice, "What are you looking for?" Baiye did not answer but continued walking forward. The 9th floor houses the operating rooms and intensive care unit, and the air is filled with a strong smell of disinfectant. Baiye pushed open the operating room door and found it filled with various medical equipment, but most of them were rusty and unusable. He quickly inspected the operating table, instrument cabinet, and filing cabinet, and found nothing except for some scalpels to keep as spare weapons. There's none here either, Baiye frowned, a slight headache creeping in. More than 2 hours had already passed. Although he has found 4 pieces of evidence so far, he knows without a doubt that the evidence will be harder to find as he goes on. Moreover, the hospital is shrouded in mystery, and he still needs to figure out how to get the 3 investigators out of here. Floors 10 to 12 are the hospital's administrative area, with the director's office located at the end of the corridor on the 12th floor. Baiye pushed open the office door and found it in a similarly messy state. Documents were scattered all over the floor, and tables and chairs were overturned, clearly indicating that the place had been ransacked during a raid 3 years ago. He quickly began searching, pulling open drawers, checking filing cabinets, and even lifting the carpet. However, apart from a few insignificant administrative documents and some yellowed newspapers, he found nothing. Tusk, looks like there's nothing useful here. It seems the general guides claim that there's a high probability of finding key clues in the director's office in hospital-type dungeons isn't necessarily accurate, Baiye said in a low voice, a hint of disappointment in his tone. Chen Yuxin stood in the doorway and asked in a low voice, "What are you looking for? Maybe I can help." Baiye glanced at her again, a thought flashing through his mind, and said, "You're an investigator sent by the authorities. You should be familiar with this hospital's criminal record, and probably know where their incriminating evidence is hidden, right?" Baiye's words startled Chen Yuxin. She lowered her head and pondered for a moment, then nodded. "Indeed, we did some investigation before the operation. The main building of St. Mary's Mental Hospital primarily houses wards and administrative areas, while the actual experimental areas are located in 2 annex buildings. One building is dedicated to drug experiments and surgeries, while the other serves as an isolation ward for detaining experimental subjects." She paused, a hint of gravity in her voice. "Our original plan was to start with the experimental area, because that's where the experimental records and evidence are most likely to be hidden. But unexpectedly, shortly after entering the experimental area, we were attacked by those experimental subjects. We were forced to split up. I escaped to the main building as for them." Chen Yuxin's voice lowered, a hint of worry flashing in her eyes. After listening to her description, Baiye frowned slightly. "The experimental area, so the remaining evidence is likely all there." Chen Yuxin didn't know why this man was so obsessed with collecting evidence, but she nodded nonetheless. That should be true. There should be quite a few records in the archives and laboratories of the experimental area, and possibly even undestroyed experimental samples and reports. However, it's very dangerous there now, not only because of the experimental subjects, but also because of the armed personnel who have broken in. Baiye did not respond immediately, but walked to the window and looked at the annex building in the distance through the broken glass. In the thick fog, the outlines of 2 annex buildings were faintly visible, and flashes of light occasionally appeared from the windows of one of the buildings, indicating that the gunfight was still ongoing. Most of the gunshots came from the experimental area, Baiye said in a low voice, a hint of thought in his tone. "It seems those armed men are also looking for something, and their target is likely the same as ours." Chen Yuxin walked to his side, followed his gaze to the annex building in the distance, and asked in a low voice, "What are you planning to do?" "Go straight to the experimental area." Baiye didn't answer immediately, but instead asked, "How did you get into the experimental area in the first place? Was there any safe route?" Chen Yuxin shook her head and said with a wry smile, "We entered through the underground passage. It used to be a contraband transport route for the hospital, leading directly to the basement of the experimental area, but now that passage is probably blocked by experimental subjects, and that's where we were separated." Baiye nodded, quickly weighing the pros and cons in his mind. Entering the experimental area directly would obviously be extremely risky, not only because of the threat posed by the experimental subjects, but also because of interference from the armed personnel. However, if the remaining evidence is not found soon, time may not be enough. "Let's go check out the underground passage first," Baiye finally decided. Chen Yuxin was taken aback, clearly not expecting him to be so decisive. "Go now, but it's very dangerous there." "Time is running out," Baiye interrupted her, his tone icy. "If you want to find your companions or complete the mission, stop talking nonsense." Chen Yuxin bit her lip, then finally nodded. "Okay, I'll lead the way." The two quickly left the dean's office, intending to walk down the stairs. But as soon as he stepped down one floor, Baiye sensed several figures going upstairs. He quickly pulled Chen Yuxin into the storage room next to the stairs, gently closed the door, leaving only a crack, and observed the movements outside through the crack. Several hurried footsteps came from below the stairs, accompanied by low voices talking. "Hurry, the other teammates have already engaged the test subject, we need to hurry," a man's voice called out, tinged with anxiety. "Captain, does the dean's office really have that document?" Another voice asked, sounding like a young team member. "Not sure, but it's one of the most likely places," the man referred to as the captain replied in a low voice. "The intelligence from above indicates that the dean's office may contain the core records of the experiments. We need to find it before anyone else." The footsteps grew closer. Baiye held his breath, slightly raising the razor in his hand, ready to deal with any unexpected situation. Chen Yuxin stood behind him, so nervous that she even held her breath. Through the crack in the door, she could vaguely see several fully armed mercenaries hurrying past the stairwell and running upstairs. Only after the footsteps faded into the distance did Baiye breathe a sigh of relief and mutter, "Looks like they came for that research report too." Chen Yuxin nodded, her voice extremely low. "The higher-ups they mentioned. Could it be some organization pulling the strings behind the scenes? I don't know, but their goals are clearly aligned with ours." Baiye narrowed his eyes, a hint of coldness in his voice. "You stand here and wait for me for a few minutes." Chen Yuxin was stunned for a moment. "You want to?" Before she could even ask, Baiye's figure disappeared like a ghost, following behind the armed men without making a sound. Baiye moved with lightning speed, his figure darting through the dimly lit stairwell like a ghost, without making a sound. His gaze was cold and focused, and the B***G razor in his hand gleamed coldly in the dim light. Just as the last mercenary was about to step out of the stairwell, Baiye's figure suddenly drew close. His left hand swiftly covered the other man's mouth, while his right hand, holding a B***G knife, made a light, precise cut, severing the man's throat. The mercenary's body stiffened instantly, and before he could even utter a muffled groan, he collapsed limply to the ground. Without pausing, Baiye moved with light and swift steps, pouncing on the penultimate person like a cheetah. The mercenary seemed to sense something and instinctively turned around. But before he could see what was behind him, the B***G knife had already pierced the back of his neck. With a flick of the blade, the mercenary's cervical vertebrae snapped instantly, and his body collapsed limply to the ground. The last mercenary finally noticed something was wrong. He whirled around, his gun raised swiftly, and he growled, "Who?" However, before he could finish speaking, Baiye's figure was already close by. The tip of the razor blade shot out like a venomous snake, piercing precisely between the mercenary's eyebrows. As the blade was pulled out, a liquid mixed with red and white fluid spurted out. The mercenary captain's gaze froze instantly, his body stiffened for a moment, and then he slowly collapsed. The entire process took only a few seconds. The three fully armed mercenaries didn't even have a chance to fire before Baiye cleanly and efficiently took them down. "Ding, you have defeated the dungeon creature, mercenary LV9, elite unit, and gained 90 experience points. There is a 10% experience penalty for defeating weaker enemies. But the enemy was well-equipped and could be considered a mini-elite. Ding, you have defeated the dungeon mob, mercenary LV9 elite unit, and gained 90 experience points. Ding, you have defeated the dungeon creature, mercenary squad leader LV10 elite unit, and gained 165 experience points. Although the squad leader is also a minor elite units grant 2-3 experience points. So the squad leader is obviously more powerful." Baiye stood still, slightly out of breath, then quickly crouched down and began to inspect the mercenaries' equipment. The primary mid to long-range assault rifle is the HK-416A5. The primary close-range shotgun is the HK-M3000A1. And the Glock 19X modular all-purpose pistol is the Glock 19X. Other combat weapons include fragmentation grenades, stun grenades, smoke grenades, and tear gas. Even the helmets, vests, military boots, knee pads, gloves, gas masks, goggles, daggers, nylon ropes, retractable batons, utility bags, first aid kits, magazine pouches, back waist packs, leg packs, and tactical flashlights are incredibly high quality. "Wow, they've prepared for battle in all sorts of scenarios," Baiye muttered to himself, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Unfortunately, he didn't know how to use firearms. For him, it would be better to just throw the scalpels he scavenged from the operating room as throwing knives, than to use these firearms that could only deal fixed damage. However, it would be good to arm Chen Yuxin a bit, Baiye thought, stroking his chin. Since the other party is an investigator sent by the government, they will likely use firearms. As Baiye pondered this, he ransacked the three mercenaries, taking most of their belongings, including their tactical bulletproof helmets and vests. He left behind one set of equipment, but threw the rest of the large and heavy equipment into his backpack. After he finished tidying up, he leisurely walked back to the stairwell storage room, knocked on the door, and said, "Hey, come out. I've taken care of them." Chen Yuxin was startled so fast. However, she didn't suspect Baiye and quickly came out of the storage room. Before she could even ask Baiye if he was injured, he handed her a set of excellent equipment. Wear these. Chen Yuxin, confused, put on her tactical helmet and bulletproof vest. But just as she finished, Baiye asked again, "Do you know how to use a gun?" Chen Yuxin paused for a moment, then nodded, "I know a little. I received basic shooting training at the Special Investigation Bureau." Upon hearing this, Baiye took an HK-416A5 assault rifle from his backpack and handed it to her. "Take this. At least it'll help you defend yourself." Chen Yuxin took the rifle, skillfully checked the magazine, chambered around, and placed her fingers naturally on the trigger guard. Baiye nodded, then took out another syringe. "Give this to yourself, it should help with your injury." Hearing this, Chen Yuxin hesitated, but then she thought that she couldn't resist anyway, and besides, her pain really needed to be relieved. Without further hesitation, she took the injection and had it administered intravenously. But just then, taking advantage of Chen Yuxin's focus on the needle, Baiye reached behind her and instantly cast a healing spell into her body. Feeling her injuries healing at a visible speed, Chen Yuxin's eyes widened. Just as she was about to say something, she heard Baiye say in surprise, "Wow, this thing works really well." A question choked Chen Yuxin up, preventing her from saying what she wanted to say. However, Baiye's healing spell, which wasn't enhanced by his staff, was clearly insufficient to fully restore Chen Yuxin, whose maximum health had reached over 400, and who had lost nearly 40% of her health. However, even if it's only recovered to a little over 10%, the other party has now basically regained their ability to move. Baiye smiled slightly and snatched the tactical dagger from her waist. "As for this thing, I'll borrow it for now." He had already noticed it earlier. Chen Yuxin's dagger was of much better quality than the mercenaries'. It was actually a Tier 1 high-quality piece of equipment. He currently lacks a suitable weapon, so this thing is barely usable. Chen Yuxin's lips twitched, but under Baiye's oppressive power, she dared not say anything. The two cautiously descended the stairs, and just as they reached the lobby on the first floor, they suddenly heard heavy footsteps and heavy breathing ahead. A blood-soaked mutant staggered into the hall, its body riddled with at least a dozen bullet holes. Its right arm twisted unnaturally, clearly having escaped after being severely wounded by the mercenaries. Even so, its scarlet eyes were still filled with murderous intent. Chen Yuxin immediately raised her gun and aimed, but before she could pull the trigger, Baiye raised his right hand. "Whoosh!" A sharp whooshing sound rang out, and a silver light streaked past like lightning, striking the mutant's forehead with astonishing speed and precision. In an instant, the tip of the scalpel pierced through the back of the monster's head, leaving a pool of red and white blood. The mutant's body suddenly paused, then collapsed to the ground in less than 2 seconds. Its body convulsed violently a few times before finally losing all life and lying there motionless. Holding the gun, Chen Yuxin stared in disbelief at the scene before her, her eyes wide and her face filled with disbelief. After a long while, Chen Yuxin slowly turned her head and her gaze fell on Baiye. She saw Baiye casually take a new scalpel out of his backpack and toy with it in his hand, as if the terrifying scene that had just happened had nothing to do with him. Who exactly are you?" Chen Yuxin's voice trembled as she asked with difficulty, this throwing technique even the instructors. However, before she could finish speaking, she was interrupted by Baiye's cold voice. "Enough with the nonsense." Baiye's tone was utterly cold, devoid of any emotion. "Lead the way to the experimental area. Your teammates are still there. If you don't want them to die, hurry up." Chen Yuxin bit her lip and gripped the rifle tightly. "This way." The two passed through the back door of the main building and moved towards the experimental area along a hidden path. In the darkness, the outline of the laboratory building appeared particularly eerie, with flickering firelight shining through a few broken windows. "The entrance to the underground passage is in the equipment room on the side of the laboratory building," Chen Yuxin said in a low voice, "but it may have already been occupied by experimental subjects." Before he could finish speaking, a fierce gunfight suddenly broke out ahead. Baiye grabbed Chen Yuxin and darted into the bushes by the roadside. Just a dozen meters away, 3 mercenaries were fighting and retreating, pursued by 2 enormous mutants. One of the mutants suddenly accelerated, and with a swipe of its claws, it sliced the last mercenary in half at the waist. "Damn it!" the mercenary leader roared, throwing a grenade. Boom! In the flash of the explosion, the 2 mutants were blown to pieces, but they quickly staggered to their feet. Baiye narrowed his eyes. "Go around them, ignore them." Under the cover of darkness, the 2 quietly circled around to the side of the laboratory building. The iron door to the equipment room was half open, and spent cartridge cases and bloodstains were scattered on the floor. "This is it." Chen Yuxin pointed to a hidden door on the ground. Below is the underground passage leading to the experimental area. Baiye nodded and was about to step forward when suddenly his ears twitched. Someone's coming. Baiye quickly pulled Chen Yuxin behind a large piece of equipment. A few seconds later, a middle-aged man covered in blood leaning on a knife staggered into the equipment room. It was Chen Yuxin's companion, Lao Zhang. Old Zhang. Chen Yuxin's heart tightened suddenly and she almost cried out in surprise. Her eyes widened as she stared at old Zhang in astonishment. Old Zhang was in extremely bad shape. His right leg was a bloody mess, as if it had been torn apart by some ferocious beast. Blood kept gushing from the wound, staining the ground beneath his feet red. His face was deathly pale, devoid of any color, and cold sweat beaded on his forehead. His body trembled slightly from the intense pain. Despite the pain, old Zhang stumbled and ran towards the hidden door. His steps were unsteady, as if he might fall to the ground at any moment, but he gritted his teeth and persisted in moving forward. Just as he was about to open the hidden door, a low growl suddenly came from behind him. Chen Yuxin's heart raced instantly. She immediately raised the gun in her hand and nervously stared at the direction of the hidden door. A smaller mutant darted in through the door like lightning. It was incredibly fast, like a gust of wind, and in the blink of an eye it was in front of old Zhang. Old Zhang was about to draw his blade and fight when he heard a bang. At the critical moment, Chen Yuxin pulled the trigger without hesitation. Gunshots echoed in the narrow space as 7 or 8 bullets rained down on the mutant. The bullet struck the mutant's body precisely, splattering blood everywhere. However, this did not cause fatal damage to the mutant. It only paused briefly before continuing its ferocious attack on old Zhang. Just then, a silver light flashed like lightning. Chen Yuxin felt a blur before her eyes, followed by a whoosh sound. She looked closely and saw that the mutant's head had been blown apart with brain matter and blood splattering everywhere. Old Zhang turned his head in surprise. When he saw Chen Yuxin fully armed, he was clearly stunned for a moment, but soon, a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes. However, when his gaze fell upon Baiye, a look of wariness reappeared and he asked hesitantly, "Who is he?" "My surname is Bai, but now is not the time for explanations." Baiye's voice was icy cold, devoid of any emotion. "What's the situation down there?" Old Zhang, panting heavily, said in broken sentences, "The experimental area is out of control. Xiao Liu is trapped in the B-Zone lab. I don't know exactly where, those mercenaries. They're looking for him." Before he could finish speaking, old Zhang's body suddenly trembled violently. He coughed violently, each cough sounding as if he were coughing up his lungs, and the blood spilling from the corner of his mouth was particularly glaring against his pale skin. Seeing this, Chen Yuxin rushed forward to support old Zhang, anxiously calling out, "Old Zhang, hang in there." Baiye quickly walked to Lao Zhang's side, his brows furrowed, and he swiftly checked Lao Zhang's injuries. Old Zhang's right leg wound had turned black, and the surrounding skin was swollen, clearly indicating an infection with some kind of toxin. Baiye's heart sank. He opened the system interface to check Lao Zhang's status. The system displayed that the opponent's level was as high as LV-14, and it was an elite-friendly unit. At this moment, his health points had already dropped by more than 50%, and he was also suffering from poison and continued to lose health. Without hesitation, Baiye took an emergency injection from his backpack, handed it to Chen Yuxin and said, "Give him the injection." Chen Yuxin took the injection. She was all too familiar with its effects. She quickly injected the medication into Lao Zhang's vein, and as the medication was administered, Lao Zhang's previously painful expression immediately eased somewhat. However, just as the two looked down to examine their injuries, Baiye turned his back and secretly conjured a healing spell and a purification spell in his sleeve with his right hand. 2 barely perceptible green lights flashed from his fingertips and silently entered old Zhang's body. Old Zhang suddenly widened his eyes, staring incredulously at the wound on his right leg. The blackened toxins were receding at a visible rate, and the bloody wounds were beginning to heal rapidly. However, this old Zhang is of a higher level, especially with his constitution attribute reaching 38 points, plus some excellent feats unique to elite units. His life value is over 600 points. Baiye cast a healing spell without a staff, which only restored less than 15% of his health, but at least it stabilized his injuries, and the wounds had begun to scab over. How is this possible? Old Zhang was utterly astonished. He reached out with trembling hands and gently touched the scabbed wound. "Even in the station, I've never seen a medicine that heals so quickly." Chen Yuxin, standing nearby, was equally surprised. She murmured to herself, "I've never seen such a fast-acting emergency medicine before. I used one just now and I've almost fully recovered." Baiye looked at them expressionlessly, showing no intention of giving old Zhang another healing spell. After all, Lao Zhang is an elite unit at level 14, and his strength should not be underestimated. If he were to fully recover his combat power, I would have to spare some attention to be wary of him. Baiye turned around nonchalantly and explained in a calm tone, I found this on a mercenary. It's probably some kind of special medicine. As he spoke, he casually tossed the empty syringe into his backpack, then quickly changed the subject. Now that you can move, why don't you help me look for something? Old Zhang struggled to his feet, his body still swaying slightly, clearly not yet fully recovered from his injuries. But he still endured the discomfort and carefully moved his right leg. When he discovered that his right leg could now walk with difficulty as usual, he looked at Baiye with a puzzled expression. However, time was of the essence, and as a seasoned investigator, Lao Zhang naturally knew what to do next. He composed himself and asked in a low voice, "What are you looking for?" Although the three of them came with a mission and certainly had their own things to do, they had been instructed beforehand that if things became unmanageable, their priority should be self-preservation. If they can bring back any information about the hospital's interior, they've already gained a lot. So when Baiye helped him recover from his serious injuries, out of a sense of gratitude, he temporarily chose to suppress his vigilance and instead preferred to cooperate with her. Baiye's answer was concise and clear. All evidence, documents, videos, samples, and any physical evidence that can prove the existence of the human experiments 3 years ago. Old Zhang and Chen Yuxin exchanged a glance, both able to see a hint of doubt in each other's eyes. Chen Yuxin hesitated for a moment, then whispered to Lao Zhang, he helped me a lot and seems to be on our side. After thinking for a moment, old Zhang finally nodded, indicating that he trusted Chen Yuxin's judgment. Then he took out a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket, unfolded it, and handed it to Baiye. This is a floor plan of the experimental area, old Zhang said, pointing to the drawing. Area A is the administrative center, which I've already explored. I didn't find the experimental evidence you mentioned. Area B is the main experimental site, and the archives are in Area C. However, that area is currently... His finger circled several areas on the drawing in red. These areas have seen high-risk mutants. Baiye's gaze swept quickly across the blueprints, imprinting the layout deeply into his mind. We'll go to Area B first. Your teammates should still be there and... His voice suddenly turned low, as if he were suppressing some emotion. Those mercenaries seemed to have found something. After saying that, he squinted and carefully observed his surroundings. The three hurried along the underground passage, which was filled with a pungent chemical odor that made them feel somewhat suffocated. The walls were covered with suspicious black stains, as if they were the marks left by some unknown creature. Old Zhang still followed behind with a limp, but his movements were much better than before. Judging from his frequent wary glances back, this investigator was indeed more experienced than Chen Yuxin. Watch out, there's a fork in the road ahead, old Zhang whispered a warning. The left path leads to Area B and the right path leads to... However, before he could finish speaking, a piercing metallic clang suddenly came from the passage on the right. The sound echoed through the silent underground tunnel, making one's eardrums tremble. Then came a chilling chewing sound, as if some enormous monster was tearing something apart. Baiye's expression instantly turned serious. He raised his hand to signal everyone to stop, and then, like a ghost, he silently crept to the corner and cautiously peeked out. Just a dozen meters away, an unprecedented mutant was feasting on the corpse of a mercenary. The monster was over 2 meters tall, with several tentacle-like growths extending from its back, and its skin was an unhealthy grayish-purple color. Baiye shrank back, made a shushing gesture, and pointed to the passage on the left. The three of them held their breath and carefully avoided the monster. From the system prompt, he clearly saw the level column above the other party's head, which clearly stated LV-14 Small Elite Unit. After passing through several winding corridors, a metal door marked Sector B appeared ahead. The electronic lock on the door was malfunctioning, and a faint smell of blood seeped from the cracks in the door. Baiye gestured for the two to step back, then took out his keychain and looked at it. Disappointed, he took out the B*****G knife again and broke the lock before pushing the door open. However, the scene inside the door made even the well-traveled man frown. The laboratory was in complete disarray, with various instruments and equipment overturned and the walls splattered with blackened blood. The most disturbing thing was the huge, transparent culture chamber in the center, inside which floated a twisted humanoid specimen. Oh my god! Chen Yuxin covered her mouth, trying hard to suppress the urge to vomit. Old Zhang's face turned ashen. This is the experiment they conducted. Baiye did not answer, because the system had already issued another prompt in his mind. Upon hearing the system notification, Baiye was somewhat surprised, not expecting that this so-called evidence could be so abstract. However, this appears to be an important experimental site. There should be other evidence, right? Soon, his gaze settled on a computer in the corner. Although the screen was cracked, the indicator light on the computer was still glowing a faint red light. He walked quickly over and tried to wake the screen. A password is required. Old Zhang curiously leaned over to look at the screen, then pondered for a moment and said, "Let me try." He quickly typed several sets of numbers on the keyboard, and as his fingers tapped, the screen suddenly lit up, displaying a list of encrypted files. Seeing this, Chen Yuxin asked in surprise, "How did you know the password?" Old Zhang explained with a wry smile, "It's a professional habit. The passwords for these medical institutions usually follow a pattern. I've used similar systems before, so I just tried entering one." However, he was suddenly interrupted before he could finish speaking, because his eyes widened and he stared intently at the screen, as if he had seen something shocking. Seeing this, Baiye followed his gaze and saw a video file on the screen labeled Final Experiment Subject Code Name, Dreamweaver. He clicked play without hesitation. In the video, a frail young girl is tightly strapped to an experimental chair. Her body is extremely weak, and her expression is numb, as if she has long been accustomed to similar experiments. Around her stood several researchers in white lab coats, their faces expressionless as they watched the girl. One of the researchers said to the camera, "The 19th consciousness interference experiment has begun. The subject is stable and brainwave activity is abnormally high. We can begin the distortion experiment." Upon seeing this, Baiye's lips twitched violently. UB ******************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************* video audio is distorted right. The video suddenly jumps to another scene. The girl's eyes glow with an eerie blue light, while the researcher opposite her stands with his legs turned inward, laughing hysterically with his hands on his face, then bursting into tears as if controlled by some emotion. The very next second, several blurry, illusory figures appeared in the video, solidifying within seconds and transforming into hideous, monstrous mutants. Ding! Congratulations to player Moonlit Sky for finding one of the 8 pieces of evidence related to human experimentation at St. Mary's Mental Hospital, current progress 6/8. Baiye frowned after watching the video, because the last scene gave him a vague idea of what was going on. The mutants that suddenly appeared in the video didn't seem to exist in reality. They were summoned from somewhere by this girl known as the Dream Weaver. Dream Weaver's dream. Baiye swiftly copied the video file to the USB drive he'd taken from the archives, and asked at the same time, "Does your Special Investigations Bureau know about this Dream Weaver?" Upon hearing this, old Zhang first shook his head, indicating that he had never heard of the existence of this experimental subject. However, his gaze was suddenly drawn to a detail on the screen. He pointed to a spot on the screen and said, "But, look at this researcher's name tag. It says Associate Chief Physician Wang Lihua." The shift schedule he found in the main building flashed through Baiye's mind instantly, clearly stating, Thursday to Friday, Wang Lihua, Associate Chief Physician. Without hesitation, he immediately pulled up the employee files on the computer and after a quick search, found Wang Lihua's office location, room 203, Block C. "Let's go there and take a look." Baiye made a decisive decision. If the Dream Weaver is still alive, then Wang Lihua is very likely the most crucial evidence. However, just as they were preparing to act, a series of heavy footsteps suddenly came from outside the laboratory. The sound was like that of a demon from hell, accompanied by the ear-piercing sound of metal being torn apart, which sent chills down their spines. Old Zhang's face turned deathly pale in an instant. He cried out in terror, "It's that mutant, it's found us." Baiye chuckled lightly, "What's the panic? Since we've been discovered, let's just take it down." As he spoke, he flipped his right hand and conjured a shotgun, an assault rifle, and a pistol out of thin air, which were neatly arranged on the ground. Old Zhang and Chen Yuxin stared in disbelief at this magical scene. "Choose one," Baiye said simply. Old Zhang swallowed hard, his eyes widening. Where did you get this from?" "Hurry up, there's no time to explain." Baiye interrupted him, pointing to the approaching footsteps. "That thing is almost here." Old Zhang gritted his teeth and grabbed a shotgun. "This one's powerful in close combat." Baiye nodded, waved his hand, and the remaining 2 guns vanished into thin air. Chen Yuxin couldn't help but ask, "Then what will you use?" Baiye didn't answer. Instead, he snatched the long knife from old Zhang's hand, weighed it in his hand and said, "This thing is more comfortable to handle." From the moment Baiye saw Lao Zhang, he had already set his sights on this knife. Like Chen Yuxin's dagger, this knife is also a Tier 1 high-quality item, although it's unknown what material it's made of. Although it's not as good as his crying rose, it's currently the best weapon for him. When old Zhang saw his weapon being taken, he also twitched the corner of his mouth. But since the other party had done him a favor, he couldn't say anything more. The next second, the laboratory door was slammed open with tremendous force, and the giant mutant roared as it charged in. Its tentacles thrashed about wildly, overturning all the experimental equipment along its path. "Fire," Baiye commanded. Without hesitation, Lao Zhang pulled the trigger, and the roar of the shotgun was deafening in the confined space. Dozens of steel balls whistled out, smashing the mutant's chest into a bloody mess. The monster roared in pain, and 3 tentacles attacked the 3 of them simultaneously. Chen Yuxin reacted extremely quickly, rolling to dodge the attack while simultaneously firing her gun, the bullet precisely severing one of the tentacles. Baiye stood motionless, and just as the tentacle was about to strike him, a flash of cold light appeared from his longsword. Whoosh. The tentacles snapped off instantly, black blood spurting out. The mutant let out a painful roar, and the remaining 2 tentacles lashed the ground wildly, smashing dents into the metal floor. "Continue the firepower suppression," Baiye shouted, his figure advancing forward like a ghost. Old Zhang and Chen Yuxin tacitly spread out and fired continuously from both sides. The mutant was restrained by the firepower and was unable to concentrate its attack for a while. Baiye seized the opportunity, rushed to the monster in one stride, and slashed down with his long sword, which whistled through the air. The blade embedded itself deeply into the mutant's shoulder, black blood gushing out like a fountain. The monster, in pain, slammed its enormous hand down on Baiye. Baiye neither dodged nor flinched. A scalpel suddenly appeared in his left hand, which he precisely pierced the monster's wrist joint. The mutant's movements froze for a moment, and Baiye seized the opportunity to draw his longsword and unleash another horizontal slash. Snap. With a crisp snapping sound, the monster's left arm broke off, falling straight to the ground like a severed tree branch. The monster let out a piercing howl, a sound that seemed to come from the depths of hell, sending chills down one's spine. Its body trembled violently, and its remaining tentacles thrashed wildly as if out of control, seemingly making a final struggle. "Let's end this." Baiye stared expressionlessly at the monster before him, the long sword in his hand gleaming coldly, and with the force of a thunderbolt, he mercilessly cleaved towards the monster's head. Bangs! Just as the blade was about to strike the monster's head, something unexpected happened. The monster's head seemed to be torn apart by an invisible force, bursting open and spewing out a thick pitch-black mist, like a black whirlwind, instantly enveloping Baiye. "Watch out, it's poisonous." Old Zhang's face changed drastically upon seeing this, and he cried out in alarm. However, Baiye remained unmoved. Within the black mist, a transparent magical barrier could be vaguely seen tightly enveloping him. The blade in his hand did not falter in the slightest due to this sudden turn of events, and continued to slash at the monster's body with astonishing speed. Snap. With another sharp crack, the monster's body was cleaved in 2, blood and entrails splattering everywhere, forming a nauseating pool of blood on the ground. "Ding, you have killed the instance creature, Mutant T07, LV-14, Elite Unit, and gained 864 experience points." Baiye calmly flicked the blood off his blade, then turned to look at old Zhang and the other person standing dumbfounded to the side, and said indifferently, "It's resolved." Old Zhang's mouth was wide open, as if he could fit an egg inside. His eyes were wide open and his face was full of disbelief. After a long while he finally came to his senses and stammered, who exactly are you?" Chen Yuxin's face was filled with disbelief. Her eyes widened as her gaze darted back and forth between the assault rifle in her hand and Baiye's seemingly ordinary longsword. Although both she and Lao Zhang had received special training and possessed combat abilities that surpassed human limits, what was happening before her eyes still shocked her immensely. Baiye merely glanced at them casually before continuing to deal with the mutated remains in front of him. He spoke to them as he skillfully dissected the corpse. "You stay here and keep an eye on the surroundings for me, see if there's anything else that can be used as evidence." Baiye's voice was calm and indifferent, revealing no emotion whatsoever. "I'm going to clear out the mutants in Sector B, and while I'm at it, I'll help you find your last colleague." Before he finished speaking, he picked up a crystal that shimmered with an eerie purple light from the wreckage of the mutant, and without even looking at it, casually tossed it into his backpack. Old Zhang and Chen Yuxin exchanged a glance, both seeing a deep sense of awe in each other's eyes. Baiye gripped his longsword tightly and slowly stepped out of the laboratory. The corridor in Block B was even darker and damper than he had expected, filled with a pungent smell of blood and chemicals that made him want to vomit. Most of the fluorescent light tubes on the ceiling were broken, and the few remaining lights flickered with a pale white light, casting an unpredictable glow throughout the corridor, as if they might go out at any moment. Baiye moved quietly, hugging the wall as he went, his keen senses allowing him to detect every subtle movement around him. Soon, a low, labored breathing sound came from around the corner ahead, mixed with the dripping sound of liquid, like some kind of monster enjoying its prey. He held his breath and slowly peeked out. The sight before him made him frown slightly. A mutant was squatting in front of a mercenary's corpse, its back to him, devouring it. This mutant is small in size, but its limbs are unusually long, with sharp bone spurs extending from its fingertips, and its movements are characterized by an eerie elegance. Without hesitation, Baiye hurled the 3 scalpels in his hand. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. As the blades sliced through the air, 3 scalpels, accompanied by a sharp whistling sound, precisely cleaved into the back of the mutant's head. The monster didn't even have time to scream before it collapsed to the ground with a thud, its green fluid splattering everywhere. Baiye stepped forward, retrieved the 3 scalpels, and shook off the blood and grime. Just then, rustling sounds suddenly came from both sides of the corridor, as if countless pairs of eyes were secretly watching him. His eyes narrowed, and he quickly turned around. 3 mutants emerged from the ventilation duct. They were small in size but incredibly agile, surrounding him in a triangular formation. Wow, are all the mutants in this area agile? Baiye raised an eyebrow, and with a flick of his right hand, 3 scalpels appeared between his fingers. "Tusk a nobody," he muttered under his breath. The mutants attacked simultaneously. Baiye flashed forward, and his scalpel transformed into 3 streaks of silver light that shot out. Fifth. 3 scalpels were precisely driven into the mutated creature's forehead, and the sword intent contained within them erupted, instantly taking away more than half of its life points. The 3 mutants stopped moving abruptly, crashed heavily to the ground, and convulsed, their red and white brain matter mixed with green tissue fluid flowing out. Before long, the bleeding damage from the severe blows to their vital parts depleted their health. Baiye withdrew his scalpel, dug out the crystals from between the monster's eyebrows, and then found some dispensable supplies on the mercenaries whose faces had been torn to shreds before continuing onward. Turning the corner, a half-open metal door appeared ahead. He could faintly hear the sound of liquid dripping from inside. He pushed the door open, and the sight before him made his pupils shrink slightly. This was a spacious laboratory with a dozen or so huge culture chambers in the center. Most of them were broken, and green culture medium was spilled all over the floor, emitting a nauseating smell. Most disturbingly, the cultivation chamber was filled with various twisted humanoid creatures, some of which even retained some human characteristics, but their bodies had undergone horrific mutations, resembling monsters born from hell. Despite his discomfort, Baiye quickly checked every corner of the laboratory. In front of a computer terminal in a corner, he found an experimental log that had not been completely destroyed. Experiment log no. B07. Experiment subject number 12. Injection dose 2000 mg. Reaction: abnormal hardening of muscle tissue. 300% increase in bone density but severe decline in brain function. Note: it is recommended to terminate the experiment and destroy the samples. Baiye quickly put the log into his tactical backpack. However, it was clear that this experimental log was similar to other experimental logs, so the system did not allow him to count it as a progress level. Just then, the laboratory's ventilation ducts began to vibrate violently without warning. Immediately afterwards, there was a deafening boom, and the ceiling was torn open by some sharp object. With a whooshing sound, a 2-meter-tall, slender mutant descended from the sky like a ghost. Its body shape barely reveals the outline of a woman, but its extreme thinness and bizarre appearance only add to its horror. It was so thin that it seemed to be nothing more than a skin bag covering bones and muscle tissue, every inch of skin taut, highlighting violent muscle lines. Baiye's heart skipped a beat, and he quickly retreated, kicking up a cloud of dust from the ground beneath his feet. The mutant launched its attack instantly. Its figure flashed, moving so fast that it was almost a black shadow. Its long, sharp claw, accompanied by a fierce gust of wind, pounced towards Baiye. Baiye felt a wave of death wash over him, and he quickly dodged to the side, barely avoiding the fatal blow. The claw slammed directly into the ground, instantly creating a crater half a meter deep and about a meter in diameter. Debris flew everywhere like bullets. Roar! The mutant let out a sharp roar like the cry of a night owl, its scarlet eyes flashing with cold, killing intent as it locked onto Baiye. Tusk. An elite monster of the assassin type. Baiye sighed inwardly. To him, this kind of monster was actually the most troublesome. Because if it's a warrior-type monster, even if he can't defeat it head-on, he can use his movement skills to constantly maneuver and reduce the opponent's health. But for assassin-type characters, they need to be careful not to get instantly killed by their opponent. After all, he's still a fragile priest, The monster launched the first attack. It was incredibly fast. In a flash, it appeared in front of Baiye, its thick arms sweeping out like a whirlwind. Baiye dared not take the attack head-on. He retreated rapidly, and at the same time the scalpel in his hand flew out like bullets, shooting densely at the monster in an attempt to stop its attack. Puff, puff, puff. Several scalpels pierced the monster's skin and muscle tissue, but only a little black blood seeped out from these places, and it did not cause much damage. Upon seeing this, Baiye couldn't help but remark, "What kind of assassin is so tough?" The mutant, in pain, swung its claws even more frantically, instantly shattering the surrounding experimental equipment, sending parts flying everywhere. Seizing the moment when the monster went berserk, Baiye lunged forward, his longsword whistling through the air as he slashed towards the monster's head. The longsword was imbued with the sword intent he had just gathered, greatly increasing its power. Snap! The monster raised its hand to block, but its sharp nails were cleanly severed like butter meeting a red-hot knife. The remaining force even managed to cut its left eye. But the monster's claws quickly grew back and its speed increased again. It suddenly turned around and its sharp claws like sharp steel knives stabbed towards Baiye at an extremely fast speed. Baiye's pupils contracted sharply. Relying on his excellent combat instincts, he slightly shifted his body and the sharp nails grazed his cheek. That was close. I don't know if the other person's nails carry any viruses, so I'd better try my best to avoid getting hurt. The mutant let out a low growl, black blood oozing from its wounded left eye, while its right eye flashed with an even more ferocious light as it launched another attack. Baiye dodged the monster's barrage of attacks, his longsword constantly searching for an opening. Finally, as the monster pounced again, Baiye seized the opportunity and used his longsword to make a shallow cut on its abdomen. The monster, in pain, swung its claws even more frantically, trying to devour Baiye. Baiye knew that he would eventually run out of energy if things continued like this, and he had to find a way to restrain this monster. He took out the scalpel again, concentrated his mental energy, and imbued it with his surgical intent. When the mutant attacked again, Baiye frantically hurled scalpels at it, each scalpel imbued with the sharpness of a blade. Whoosh, 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 the scalpel relentlessly pursued the monster. Although the monster's skin and flesh were tough, the true wounds imbued with the scalpel's intent continued to inflict damage, instantly reducing its health to 60%. The mutant seemed to be completely enraged. Its movements became more violent and frenzied as it relentlessly lunged at White Knight. Baiye, with near-perfect positioning, constantly increased the distance between herself and the creature, relentlessly attacking it with surgical precision. In the instant the monster missed its target and lost its balance, a resolute glint flashed in Baiye's eyes. He seized the opportunity, gathering all his strength in his longsword and slashed straight at the monster's leg. This strike severed 3/4 of the opponent's thigh. Roar! The mutant let out a roar of extreme pain, blood gushing out like a fountain. Its massive body began to sway and it collapsed, unable to support itself on its other leg. Seizing this fleeting, perfect opportunity, Baiye moved with lightning speed, instantly appearing before the monster. Gripping his blood-stained longsword, he fiercely swung it down towards the monster's head. With a sharp crack, the monster's head fell off, black blood gushing out like a fountain from its severed neck. Its massive body slammed heavily to the ground, raising a cloud of dust. Ding. You have defeated a dungeon mob, a level 12 mutant high elite unit, and gained 1440 experience points. After the battle, Baiye rubbed his sore head. After such a fierce fight, his mental energy was almost down to 50%, and his physical strength was also starting to give out. After resting for a while, he slowly stood up, picked up the scalpels that were still relatively intact, and then dug the crystal core out of the elite monster's head. Its nails seem pretty sharp too, they should fetch a good price. I need to find a place to recover quickly. Baiye wiped the sweat from his forehead and sighed softly. My body is still too weak. I need to start strengthening it with sword intent as soon as I get out. Once he successfully breaks through to the first level, he should be able to use many of his abilities in the cultivation world, and his combat power will definitely experience a surge. Just as he was leaving the lab and planning to go around to the other end to return, he suddenly heard faint breathing sounds coming from the changing room not far away. He cautiously pushed open the door and found a young man in an investigator's uniform unconscious in a locker. The man had a deep, bone-exposing wound on his left shoulder, and the area around the wound had turned an unnatural bluish-gray. Baiye raised an eyebrow, looking at the uniform worn by the other person, identical to that of Chen Yuxin and Lao Zhang. This was the Xiao Liu they were referring to, the third investigator from the Special Investigation Bureau. Judging from his near-death appearance, his injuries were far more severe than old Zhang's. Not only had he lost 84% of his health, but he was also suffering from poisoning and was continuously losing blood. If I had arrived an hour later, no, just half an hour later, I doubt even I could have saved this guy. Baiye checked the other party's condition and found no signs of waking up. Without any pretense, he directly cast a first-level holy light healing and purification spell into Xiao Liu's body. A soft golden light enveloped the wound, the bluish-gray tinge quickly faded, and the wound healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Of course, even if Xiao Liu's physical attributes are not as good as Lao Zhang's, they are not much different from Chen Yuxin's. Its health points also reached just over 400, so a single holy light heal was naturally not enough to bring its health points back to the minimum acceptable level. Baiye checked his remaining magic power and felt he should still have enough. Without hesitation, he cast another holy light heal, raising the opponent's health to over 80%. Immediately afterwards, he used a mind-awakening spell, slapping it onto the man's forehead. The man's body suddenly trembled and he began to cough violently. After a while, his coughing gradually subsided. He opened his eyes blankly, his gaze unfocused, clearly not yet fully awake from his coma. The man's voice was very weak, as if he might faint again at any moment. Seeing this, Baiye stepped forward, smiled, and gave him a thumbs up. The surgery was a success, you're a girl now. Upon hearing this, the man's lips twitched slightly, but he was mostly awake now. He tried to move his body and realized that most of his injuries had already healed. His expression softened slightly as he looked at the absurd stranger before him, guessing that this was likely the other person's doing. He quickly thanked him. Thank you. My name is Liu Ming, and I'm an investigator with the Special Investigation Bureau. Then with some doubt he asked, who are you? Liu Ming with fire tongs. Baiye chuckled inwardly, but his expression remained unchanged. He simply nodded and said, don't ask so many questions. Let's go. Chen Yuxin and Lao Zhang are waiting for you in the B-Zone lab. Upon hearing this, Liu Ming didn't go against the grain and didn't press Baiye for his identity. After all, the other party had accurately identified his two companions and saved him, so it was probably believable. The two walked out of the changing room one after the other. The corridor was quiet. The previous battle seemed to have scared away the other mutants. Liu Ming stared wide-eyed at the mess on the floor, utterly incredulous. You cleaned all of this up. Baiye simply responded with a casual and continued walking forward. However, just as they stepped out of the locker room, Baiye suddenly stopped in his tracks. Caught off guard, Liu Ming stumbled and nearly bumped into Baiye. He quickly steadied himself and asked, somewhat puzzled, what happened? Baiye's gaze, sharp as a hawk's, fixed intently on Liu Ming as he slowly spoke. While you were searching this floor, did you find any unusual information? Liu Ming was taken aback by Baiye's sudden question. He subconsciously touched his healed wound, hesitated for a moment, and replied, information. We were attacked as soon as we entered this hospital. We didn't have time to look for information at all. At this point, Liu Ming suddenly seemed to remember something, and a smile appeared on his face. But, I think I've already found a way out of this hospital. Upon hearing this, Baiye felt a surge of emotion. During this period, besides searching for evidence of those 8 human experiments, he himself was also constantly looking for a way out. After all, the hospital was completely shrouded in mist, and a mysterious force was preventing those inside from leaving even him somewhat helpless. Who would have thought that after searching high and low, I'd find it so easily? It turns out Liu Ming is a key character, just like the cook Martha from the previous instance. That was close. If I had arrived half an hour later, it would have been much harder to escape this instance after this guy died. So he raised an eyebrow and said, tell me more. Upon seeing Baiye, Liu Ming felt a surge of alertness. He hesitated for a moment before slowly saying, actually, after separating from Lao Zhang and Xiao Chen, we were both pursued. The group of mutants chasing me was very fast, forcing me to take refuge in the laboratory's ventilation ducts. I breathed a sigh of relief as the sound faded into the distance, intending to continue searching for an exit through the ventilation ducts. Unexpectedly, at another branch of the duct, I discovered some strange markings and blueprints. I was curious, so I went down the stairs to examine those things and discovered that the hospital had some structures we didn't know about before. One of the blueprints mentions a special passageway, seemingly designed for the emergency evacuation of important items or personnel. And this passageway is located on this floor near the underground laboratory. Baiye pondered an underground laboratory. We haven't found any unusual passages along the way. Liu Ming shook his head. I only realized how well this passage was disguised after seeing that blueprint. The entrance is behind what looks like an ordinary storage room, and this special passage seems to be protected by a mysterious force, making it normally hidden and invisible. Baiye hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Have you been inside?" Liu Ming nodded. "I went in and confirmed that it leads to the backyard of a restaurant outside the hospital, which happens to be unaffected by the fog." He then continued, "But my two colleagues hadn't met up with me yet, so I couldn't just run off on my own. So I ran back to look for them, and that's when I encountered a truly terrifying monster nearby." Upon hearing this, Baiye asked, "Was it a mutant that looked female, was very fast, and had very sharp nails? Was it the one that beat you up like this?" Liu Ming replied that he had indeed been severely injured by the monster, and that he would probably have died if he hadn't escaped into the ventilation duct again. However, he was somewhat surprised as to how Baiye knew this. Baiye casually replied, "Oh, I already killed that monster." He then ignored the shock in Liu Ming's eyes and led him out of there, heading towards where Chen Yuxin and Lao Zhang were. When the two returned to the lab, Lao Zhang was squatting in front of a server operating something. "Brother Zhang," Liu Ming shouted excitedly. Old Zhang whirled around, his eyes widening behind his glasses. "Little Liu." Then he began to carefully examine Liu Ming's body. "How are you? Are you all right?" Liu Ming gave a wry smile. "Something happened, and I almost didn't see you again. If this gentleman hadn't had such a highly effective treatment, I'd probably be dead by now." Old Zhang looked deeply at Baiye and said solemnly, "Mr. Bai, thank you for your great kindness. You saved the lives of all three of us. If we can get out of here this time." Before he could finish speaking, Baiye quickly interrupted his spellcasting. "All right, stop beating around the bush. Did you find the information I needed?" Upon hearing this, Chen Yuxin peeked out from behind the filing cabinet, holding a folder in her hand. "Found it. This is the transfer record of the experimental subject." Baiye strode over, opened the folder, and found a detailed record of how the hospital secretly transferred 8 experimental subjects to the underground isolation area on the eve of the raid. Experimental Subject Transfer Record. Date October 22, 2020. Location: St. Mary's Mental Hospital, main building and underground isolation area. During the clandestine experiments conducted in the hospital, as the experiments progressed, some of the test subjects exhibited extremely unusual behaviors, with their physical changes and abilities gradually spiraling out of control. Meanwhile, external pressures are constantly increasing in order to prevent the leakage of experimental secrets and to deal with possible emergencies. A decision was made to secretly transfer some core experimental subjects to a more concealed underground isolation zone for continued in-depth research and control. Transfer preparation. 1. Selection of experimental subjects. Based on the experimental data and the performance of the experimental subjects, 8 subjects with special significance and potential value were selected for transfer. These subjects were numbered Subject 01, Dreamweaver, Subject 07, Subject 12, Subject 15, Subject 19, Subject 23, Subject 29, and Subject 36. 2. Material preparation. Sufficient sedatives, tranquilizer guns, specially designed sealing devices, and sealed containers for transportation were prepared to deal with possible struggles and resistance from different test subjects. At the same time, a professional medical team and security personnel were arranged to assist with the transfer, and corresponding research and monitoring facilities were pre-positioned in the underground isolation area. 3. Route planning. A detailed transfer route was developed, selecting relatively secluded and low-traffic routes within the hospital to avoid researchers and patients in other areas as much as possible, thereby reducing the risk of being discovered during the transfer. The transfer result. Unfortunately, our transfer was discovered halfway through, forcing us to abandon experimental subjects T07, 12, 15, and 19. However, as long as T01 remains, our experimental project will not be affected. After the 4 subjects successfully arrived at the underground quarantine area, they were placed in different research rooms. The medical team in the ward conducted detailed physical and mental examinations on each test subject to ensure their physical condition was stable. The research team, on the other hand, conducted more in-depth research on test subject T01, the Dream Weaver, attempting to unlock its ability to influence reality through dreams. However, the research did not progress smoothly. Meanwhile, the protective system in the underground isolation zone experienced some unknown malfunctions, causing abnormal energy fluctuations in some areas, requiring urgent repairs. Although this document is not lengthy, the useful information extracted from it is crucial. First, Baiye finally learned about the experimental subject's ability, known as the Dream Weaver, for the first time to change reality through dreams. No wonder these guys are so crazy. If they could really develop the ability to change reality through dreams, it would all be worth it for them. Secondly, this transfer record also mentions the passage that Liu Ming mentioned. It seems that even without him, as long as I find this information, I might be able to find an escape route. Finally, the document also mentions a place called Roman 20 Ward, XX Ward. Is this the same Blackthorn Wharf mentioned in the previous instance, a sequel to this instance? Ding! Congratulations to player Moonlit Sky for finding one of the 8 pieces of evidence related to human experimentation at St. Mary's Mental Hospital, current progress 7/8. Just one last document. Baiye closed the file, turned to look at the group, and especially glanced at Liu Ming. Everyone, as you've seen, this hospital is quite dangerous. Your colleague has just found the passage mentioned in this transfer record. Do you want me to send it out, or do you want him to stay and join the fun? After a moment's thought, old Zhang slowly said, Mr. Bai, we will never forget your great kindness, but our main task this time is to find the missing people here. They're nowhere to be found, dead or alive. I need to find out the situation before I can return. How about this? Xiao Liu and Yuxin can leave through this passage first, and I'll stay here to help you and also look for the people who went missing here. I hope you won't think I'm a burden. Upon hearing this, Liu Ming hurriedly said, Brother Zhang, how can that be? We'll go together. Chen Yuxin gently tugged at Lao Zhang's sleeve, her eyes filled with worry. Lao Zhang, don't be stubborn. We're in this together now. If we have to leave, we'll leave together. Old Zhang waved his hand slightly. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Xiao Liu and Yuxin should leave first, it'll be safer for them. If you manage to get out, contact the outside world for help immediately. Don't forget we're still here. Baiye frowned slightly. Based on the panel, he knew that old Zhang's strength at his peak was probably no less than that of the elite monsters here. Moreover, he is still missing one piece of evidence and time is running out. He really needs someone to help him find it. Thinking of this, Baiye nodded. All right, Lao Zhang, it'll be as you say, but you'd better be careful. I don't have time to worry about whether you live or die. After discussing it, the group didn't waste any time and immediately headed towards the passage that Liu Ming knew about. Old Zhang and his 2 companions continued down the dimly lit corridor, surrounded by a musty smell of decay. The walls were mottled and uneven, as if eroded by time and sin. Finally, they arrived at the door of the savings room. The storage room looked ordinary with nothing special about it. The mottled wooden door exuded an old-fashioned feel in the dim light. A thin layer of dust covered the doorknob, but under the light of a tactical flashlight a handprint could be clearly seen, left by Liu Ming. The surrounding walls have no distinctive markings or decorations, blending seamlessly with the environment. At first glance, it looks like an ordinary wall. Old Zhang pushed open the door, which was filled with all sorts of odds and ends. Dilapidated file boxes, broken hospital bed parts, and some rusty medical equipment were piled up haphazardly, adding to the sense of chaos and desolation. Just then, Liu Ming spoke up, this is it. After I separated from Lao Zhang and Xiao Chen, we were chased all the way here by the mutants. I hid inside and accidentally encountered the illusion of the exit. As he spoke, he touched the wall where the exit was located. Where his fingers touched, instead of being blocked as before, they seemed to merge into the water, disappearing without a trace. Old Zhang sighed. Although I've witnessed many supernatural events before, I have to say, every mission here always manages to broaden my horizons. Baiye sensed it for a moment, then nodded. All right, stop dawdling. Liu Mings, you lead the way and take your young comrade Chen out. Upon hearing this, Liu Ming hummed in agreement, then walked in without further hesitation, disappearing completely into the wall. Before leaving, Chen Yuxin paused slightly, slowly raised her head, looked deeply at Baiye but said nothing and walked inside as well. After the two left, a system notification sounded in Baiye's mind. Ding. Congratulations to player Moonlit Sky for completing the hidden quest. Find the 3 investigators sent by the authorities to St. Mary's Mental Hospital and safely escort them out of the instance before dawn. Current progress 2/3. Yes, this is indeed the so-called exit, and unlike the graveyard in the Misty Manor instance, there is no danger here. Immediately afterwards, Baiye frowned slightly, turned to look at old Zhang beside him, and said in a low voice, There are still more than 7 hours until dawn, so time shouldn't be too tight. Let's rest here for a bit and get ready before we continue. Old Zhang nodded, not rejecting the suggestion. After all, his nerves had been on edge ever since they entered the hospital during the day, and he hadn't had a proper rest. Immediately afterwards, the two found a relatively safe place and began to close their eyes and rest. Taking this opportunity, Baiye began to fully activate his meditation technique to restore his mental energy. Half an hour later, Baiye's mental energy had been fully restored, and his physical strength had also almost recovered. When he opened his eyes, he saw that old Zhang had already fallen into a deep sleep. He calmly cast 2 healing spells on him, restoring his health to over 90%. Old Zhang felt the comfort of his wound healing, groaned, and opened his eyes. He saw Baiye holding an empty syringe, saying to him, "I saw your injury wasn't fully healed, so I treated you. This is the last syringe." He paused for a moment, then whispered to Baiye, "Thank you." Baiye shrugged nonchalantly, "Thanks, dear. I'm really counting on you to give it your all later, so your better condition will benefit me too." As he spoke, Baiye tossed him the remaining set of special operations gear he had picked up, saying, "Put these on." After the other party was dressed, Baiye continued, "Now we only have Laboratory Area C left to explore. We haven't explored the Rehabilitation Center and the Annex yet. The Rehabilitation Center is generally a patient activity area with very few paper documents and medical equipment, so it's basically not worth exploring. Therefore, we'll leave it for last. The gunfire coming from the Annex is also quite intense, so let's not join in for now. So we need to go to Area C first to make sure we haven't missed any important clues. Once their battle is almost over, we can go check out the Annex." Old Zhang nodded gently, offering no objection. "Yes, Mr. Bai, I'll do as you say." After saying that, the two slowly stepped out of the room and headed towards Area C of the laboratory building. The corridor was eerily quiet, with only the soft echo of their footsteps. Eerie lights and shadows flickered on the surrounding walls from time to time, as if countless eyes were watching their every move from the shadows. Old Zhang gripped his assault rifle tightly, ready to deal with any potential danger. After all, the upcoming battle will likely involve long-range combat, so using that shotgun from before will be somewhat inappropriate. Baiye remained highly vigilant, his eyes sharp as he scanned his surroundings. They walked step by step toward Laboratory C, a tense atmosphere permeating the air like the calm before a storm. Finally, they arrived at the entrance to Laboratory Area C. An electronic lock control panel stood at the entrance, flashing various complex symbols and indicator lights. Baiye stepped forward, carefully examining the control panel, attempting to crack the password to enter the room inside. "Old Zhang, why don't you give it a try?" Old Zhang calmly stepped forward, took out a small electronic jamming device from his pocket, skillfully connected it to the electronic lock control panel, and began attempting to crack the password. The surrounding air seemed to freeze, with only the soft beeping of the electronic lock control panel echoing in the silent room. A moment later, accompanied by a slight click sound, the keyhole of the electronic lock slowly turned, making a soft click sound. Old Zhang gently opened the door and a musty, rotten smell wafted out. "Let's go," Baiye said calmly, and the two cautiously stepped into Area C of the laboratory. A thick layer of dust filled Area C, and the ground was littered with various discarded experimental equipment and scattered documents. Some strange instruments were placed on the lab table, as if silently telling the story of the crazy experiments that had taken place here. The surrounding walls are covered with various medical data and experimental diagrams, but due to the passage of time and environmental erosion, some parts have become blurred and illegible. The two began their search methodically. Based on his extensive experience, Lao Zhang focused his inspection on the corners and hidden places where clues might be concealed. Baiye, on the other hand, used his keen senses to search for any unusual fluctuations in life energy. After a thorough search, they found no trace of the mutants in Area C, which relieved them. However, when they arrived at the office of Associate Chief Physician Wang Lihua, their anticipation was dampened by the scene before them. The office was a mess. Documents on the desk were torn to shreds, and papers scattered on the floor flew around like snowflakes. The books and documents on the shelves were also in disarray, clearly indicating that someone or some force had deliberately destroyed the clues here. "It seems someone doesn't want us to find the secret here." Baiye frowned slightly, a hint of doubt in his eyes. Old Zhang shook his head helplessly. "This undoubtedly increases the difficulty for us, but we can't give up. Perhaps there are other clues we can find." Just as the two were about to leave the office, Baiye's gaze inadvertently fell on a black-covered notebook under the desk. The cover of this notebook was torn in one corner, revealing the slightly yellowed pages inside. Baiye carefully picked it up and turned to the first page. The notes were filled out in great detail, and judging from the handwriting and word choice, they were actually a diary written by Dr. Wang Lihua herself. Date: March 15, 2020. A lot has happened at St. Mary's Mental Hospital recently. As the associate chief physician here, I originally just wanted to focus on my research and find hope for a cure for my patients. However, some mysterious experiments plunged me into deep fear and confusion. Some patients in the hospital have exhibited abnormal behavior, and their conditions are deteriorating at a rate far exceeding the normal range. Initially, I thought there was a problem with our treatment plan, or that the drugs we were researching were causing side effects. However, upon closer observation, I found that these patients' behavior and thought processes were becoming increasingly distorted, as if they were being controlled by something. Date March 25, 2020. Today, I met a special patient in the ward. He claimed to be a subject of Director Lee Jongguo's experiment, saying that Director Lee was conducting an extremely dangerous experiment aimed at creating a power that could manipulate others through mind control. At first, I thought he was just a mentally unstable patient, but his descriptions became more and more detailed, and every detail was chilling. I decided to investigate this matter secretly. We can't let such a dangerous thing happen in our hospital. I started to notice some unusual things happening around me. I noticed that some doctors and researchers were always acting mysteriously, and that strangely dressed people were often seen entering and leaving the hospital basement at night. This made me even more certain that there must be a huge secret hidden here. Date, April 8, 2020. After some time investigating, I discovered that the hospital's basement seemed to be hiding a secret. Every time I go to the basement door, I feel a mysterious force preventing me from going in. Today, I finally couldn't resist anymore, and when no one was looking, I sneaked in. The basement was filled with a pungent odor, and various strange experimental equipment and instruments were placed around it. I walked cautiously and came across a huge laboratory where some people were studying some strange samples. When they saw me, they looked panicked. The leader, Director Lee, seized the opportunity to restrain me, telling me to keep my mouth shut. Those people had already taken control of all our family members. I pretended to be frightened and left the basement, then did what he asked me to do. But I've decided to document it all, hoping that one day someone in the know will reveal the truth. Date: May 10, 2020. The investigation over this period of time has made me feel increasingly fearful and desperate. I discovered that some patients in the hospital experienced significant changes in both their physical and mental state after being injected with a mysterious drug. Some patients become more insane, while others become unusually cold and cruel. These changes are like a curse from which no one can escape. I also discovered that this experiment seems to be not just about the patients, but about the fate of the entire world. I suspect this mysterious organization wants to achieve their ambition of world domination by controlling human minds. I must find evidence as soon as possible to expose their conspiracy. Date: May 20, 2020. I began searching for specific clues about the core sample, which was key to unlocking the secrets of the entire experiment. During the investigation, I discovered a shocking fact. Our hospital has become someone else's testing ground, and we, the medical staff and patients, are nothing more than their experimental subjects. Those mysterious figures continuously conducted various cruel experiments on patients, attempting to find a way to control the human mind. I cannot let them succeed. I must find the core samples as soon as possible and stop their evil deeds. Date: June 5, 2020. In the process of searching for core samples, I encountered many difficulties and dangers. Sometimes I would be discovered by those mysterious people and almost lose my life. Fortunately, Director Lee saved me. I don't know why he would protect me after threatening me before, but perhaps he had his own unspeakable difficulties. I never gave up, believing that as long as I persisted, I would definitely be able to find the core sample and unravel the mystery here. Today, I found some information about the core sample in an abandoned laboratory. It shows that the core sample is a very special spiritual substance. Once lost, the test subject will lose control and may even unleash powerful forces. This makes me even more certain that the core sample is the key to unlocking this secret. Date: June 20, 2020. This is the last day I'll be writing in my diary. I don't know what my fate will be, but I know I must fulfill my mission. I found some clues in the basement. It seems the core sample is located deep within the hospital. I believe that one day my diary will be discovered and my story will be known. I hope people can learn from my experience and prevent such tragedies from happening again. It turns out that Dr. Wang Lihua was torn by inner turmoil after discovering the hospital's secret experiments. She was fully aware of the cruelty and danger of these experiments, but with her family being held hostage, she had no choice but to cooperate and continue the experiments. But amidst the prolonged conflict and torment, she decided to secretly record everything that happened there, hoping that one day someone in the know would reveal the truth. Oh, so Dr. Wang Lihua is actually a good person. I thought the 3 doctors who conducted these experiments were all bad guys, Baiye said slowly. Old Zhang's attention was drawn to a detail in the diary. The core sample mentioned on this page, could it be the K sample mentioned in the previous materials? Baiye carefully examined the relevant contents of the diary and discovered that the core sample seemed to be a key substance that could control the behavior of experimental subjects. Once lost, the experimental subject will lose control and may even unleash tremendous power. Ding! Congratulations to player Moonlit Sky for finding one of the 8 pieces of evidence related to human experimentation at St. Mary's Mental Hospital, current progress 8/8. Very good, the last piece of evidence has been found, and Baiye has also identified the correct escape route. With 2.5 hours remaining before the dungeon ends, he could choose to leave with the evidence at any time or continue exploring. In particular, if they could find the important document mentioned by the Special Investigations Bureau investigator and the core sample mentioned in the materials, it might significantly boost his rating. Just as they were preparing to continue searching for clues about the core sample, a signal flare was suddenly launched from the direction of the annex building. Baiye and Lao Zhang exchanged a glance, a sense of foreboding rising in their hearts. That sound ... It sounds like those armed men are about to make a group move. What happened? Old Zhang asked. Baiye's gaze sharpened slightly. Let's go. Let's go see what's going on. The two then quickly crawled into the ventilation duct, which was narrow and cramped, filled with murky air and a smell of rust and decay. Baiye lay prone at the opening of the ventilation duct, his eyes sharp as an eagle's, watching the situation below. As they moved, the scene below gradually became clearer. 10 mercenaries are engaged in a firefight with more than a dozen mutants near the cryogenic chamber on the lowest level of Sector C originally. There were 12 of them who came in. After 3 were assassinated by Baiye, 3 more were lost during their exploration of various parts of the hospital. Left with no other choice, they used a signal flare to request outside support, and their commander, Charlie, soon arrived with S-Team to provide backup. The metal door to the freezer was ajar, and cold air kept pouring out from the crack, mingling with the stench of blood from the outside. The mercenaries' firepower was extremely fierce. Their assault rifles constantly spat fire, bullets streaking through the air and tearing several mutated creatures that pounced on them to shreds. However, these mutants had clearly adapted to this high-intensity attack. Their movements did not slow down at all, but instead they pounced on the mercenaries even more frantically. The number of these mutants is unusual, Old Zhang said, frowning. There shouldn't be this many high-level mutants in this kind of area. It seems this is the detention area for experimental subjects. These mutants were probably released on purpose, Baiye said coldly, his tone tinged with seriousness. Just then, a deep roar suddenly erupted from the horde of mutants, and a burly giant slowly emerged from the monsters. This monster was a full 2.5 meters tall, with bulging muscles all over its body, maintaining a near-perfect human physique. His resolute face was as if carved by a knife and axe, and his grayish-white skin gleamed with a metallic coldness under the emergency lights. If it weren't for those scarlet eyes, one might almost mistake him for a superhero in a metallic suit. That's the Guardian of the Freezer. Old Zhang's voice suddenly trembled, and he unconsciously took a half-step back. He clearly remembered that shortly after they entered the hospital, they encountered this metal giant who shattered 3 of his ribs with a single punch, rendering him incapable of fighting. Even though the 3 of them escaped from the vicinity of the cryogenic chamber and the enemy stopped pursuing them, the other mutants that were gradually closing in still managed to scatter them. The giant strode forward silently, his metallic feet striking the ground with a dull thud. His right arm muscles suddenly tensed, and the metallic sheen beneath his skin flowed like mercury, instantly transforming his entire arm into a gleaming weapon. Upon hearing this, Baiye narrowed his eyes slightly. In his vision, the system had already provided some information about this monster. Variant Cold Storage Guardian T-15 Tier 1 Boss Unit. Reference Level LV-16. Status Berserking. Attributes Strength 62, Agility 42, Constitution 64, Spirit 38, Physical Attack 48/56, Physical Resistance 38/68, Magic Resistance 26/53, Spirit Resistance 28/36, Movement Speed 16/32. Health Points 2132-2300. Spirit Value 526-570. Energy Value 836-1230. Stamina 86-98. Sanity 212-456. Enters a state of madness when sanity falls below 50%. Specialties: Metallization Ability, Extraordinary Memory Metal, Excellent. Giant Body, Excellent. Hardened Skin, Excellent. Skills: Second Tier Charging Punch, Intermediate. First Tier Basic Punch Technique, Intermediate. First Tier Berserk Charge, Intermediate. First Tier Berserk Rampage. The level 16 boss unit was lower than I expected, and its stats. Didn't seem much stronger than the Soul Eater cat. It was a standard melee boss with high attack and high defense. Mr. Bai, what do you mean? Looking at the battle below, old Zhang asked in a low voice. Let's wait until they've fought to a standstill. Those mercenaries wouldn't go to the cold storage without a reason. It seems that place holds quite a secret. The mercenaries must have learned something from the core documents, which is why they went to such lengths to enter the cold storage. If he wasn't mistaken, there must be some crucial secrets there. Near the freezer, the battle intensified. The 7 mercenaries spread out in a fan shape, using the surrounding obstacles to fight against the ever-increasing number of mutants. Gunshots, screams, and the roars of the mutants mingled together, creating a scene resembling a living hell. How can these monsters be so strong? A young mercenary, pale-faced and with obvious fear in his voice, shouted as he fired wildly. Stop talking nonsense. Aim for their eyes and joints, that's their weak point. The mercenary leader shouted through gritted teeth, his eyes fixed on the massive cold storage guardian not far away. The cold storage guardian T-15, with its metallic body, was completely unfazed by the dense hail of bullets. Its massive form, like a heavy tank, charged headlong into the mercenaries. Its right claw suddenly lashed out, bringing with it a gust of foul wind. A mercenary who was near the edge was unable to dodge in time and was sent flying, crashing heavily to the ground, where blood spread across the floor. John, another mercenary, cried out, his eyes bloodshot, but his voice was quickly drowned out by the mutant's roar. Concentrate fire, take care of these little monsters first, the leader roared, raising his hand to fire at several mutants trying to flank from the side. The bullet struck the mutant's body, splattering blood. With the combined fire of several mercenaries, the 3 mutants were quickly dealt with. But at that moment, the guardian of the cold storage suddenly let out a deafening roar, the sound waves causing the surrounding glass shards to tremble. Then it leaped high into the air, its massive body crashing down on the mercenaries like a cannonball. The mercenaries opened fire immediately, but the dense bullets only left shallow wounds on the guardian, as if they could not cause it any real damage. Look, its wound is healing, a mercenary exclaimed in horror, his finger trembling as he pointed to a wound on the cold storage guardian. Damn it, this thing is practically indestructible. The leader gritted his teeth, muttering under his breath as he retreated. One of the team members suddenly said, Boss Charlie, that guy's target is this box. Why don't we just throw it away? If we can distract this big guy, we'll definitely have a chance to get into the cold storage. But upon hearing this, their leader Charlie roared, Our mission is to obtain the crucial documents. Anyone who dares to throw the box away will be punished severely. That's what our employer wants. If we fail, we're all dead. But boss, there are too many of these mutants. If we don't retreat now, we might be wiped out. No, we can't give up on this box, Charlie said resolutely, his eyes darting back and forth between the metal box and the mutant, seemingly searching for an opportunity to break through. The cold storage guardian roared again, its massive claws slashing out, sending several approaching mutants flying. But more mutants surged forward, shattering the mercenaries' defensive formation. Watch out for that guardian. Don't let it get close, Charlie shouted as he fired wildly. However, when bullets hit the guardian, they can only leave some dents, and these tiny dents heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. Just as the 2 sides were locked in a stalemate, Baiye said in a low voice, Prepare to make a move. His voice sounded particularly deep in the ventilation duct. As soon as he finished speaking, he leaped out of the ventilation duct, the cold steel dagger in his hand turning into a streak of silver light, aiming straight for the eyes of the cold storage guardian. Roar! The cold storage guardian, in pain, suddenly turned around and slammed its enormous claws toward Baiye. Baiye dodged quickly with a flash, and at the same time swung out another cold steel dagger. Hearing the commotion, the mercenaries all pointed their guns at Baiye. However, at that moment, Lao Zhang also leaped out of the ventilation duct, and with his shotgun at close range, he shot a mercenary in the face that was not covered by a bulletproof helmet, killing him instantly. He even had the strength to turn around, and with a sudden swing of his first-tier premium dagger, another mercenary who had just raised his gun was instantly slit in the throat. Damn it. Where did they come from? Charlie yelled, quickly directing the remaining 3 teammates to hold them off. However, in the instant the mercenaries were distracted, Baiye had already appeared before them, a scalpel pinned directly to Charlie's hand. Charlie winced in pain and the safe fell to the ground, instantly snatched away by Baiye. Grab him, Charlie shouted, and several mercenaries rushed towards Baiye, but Baiye was incredibly agile. With a few quick movements, he broke through the encirclement and blockade of the group and the mutant in no time, and left triumphantly with old Zhang. The remaining mercenaries were entangled with the mutants and could only watch helplessly as the 2 left. Not only that, the cold storage guardian and the other mutants still had no intention of letting them go, and soon they overwhelmed Charlie and his companions. The two took off running and finally managed to shake off the small group of mutants that were chasing them. Along the way, the eerie roars of the mutants could be heard from behind every now and then, making the two of them walk even more hurriedly. Fortunately, after some trouble, the two arrived safely at the rehabilitation center building in the hospital. Since Baiye had the key to the security room, he could definitely open a door like this, so the two of them easily got inside. Immediately afterwards, their eyes were drawn to the metal box as if by a magnet. The box looks ordinary, and it even has some bumps and scratches on the outside, but those mercenaries risked their lives to protect it. So there must be something important hidden inside, maybe some important documents or core samples. Baiye took a deep breath and slowly opened the metal box. As the lid of the box was opened, a faint light shone through. The two leaned closer to take a look and found a stack of brand new documents inside. The paper was as white as snow and exuded the fresh scent of ink. There was also a purple, crystal-like object next to it. This thing was crystal clear, and there seemed to be a faint light flowing inside, giving it an indescribable sense of mystery. Baiye picked up the document first, and saw that the title read, Report on a Small-Scale Dream Generation Experiment. He hurriedly flipped through the pages, which contained detailed records of Li Jiangguo and the mysterious organization's preliminary research findings on the abilities of the Dream Weavers. Good heavens, they've achieved such an amazing breakthrough. Now, with the power of the Dream Weavers, they can pull an entire real world into the dream world and transform it. Baiye's expression grew increasingly solemn as he looked around, secretly thinking to himself, no wonder this place is so eerie. It turns out that St. Mary's Hospital, where they are now, is no longer a place in the real world but a complete dream space. No wonder the people who went to the hospital before couldn't find their way out except through that so-called dream passage, which is the transfer exit. Looking at the crystal again, Baiye sensed a peculiar fluctuation as soon as his gaze swept over it. Combining the information in the document, he immediately realized that this was the core sample mentioned in the document, the Dream Crystal. Item, Dream Crystal. Rank Tier 1 can be upgraded. Quality Perfect. Type, Special Item. Recommended Classes, Nightmare Master Dream Weaver. Usage Requirements, Spirit 30, Spirit Resistance 80. Item Description. A core that gradually evolves from a dream created by the Dream Weaver's abilities, possessing the power to control the current dream. Item Attributes. Spirit +8, Constitution +2, Spirit Resistance -2, Weight 1 approx. 2.5 kg, Durability 600. Effect 1, Dream Manipulation active, consumes at least 50 points of spirit power. Allows for some degree of manipulation of creatures and the environment within dreams. The effectiveness depends on the spirit power consumed. Effect 2, Lucid Dream passive. The holder gains a lucid dream state in dreams, granting +20% to all attributes and an additional +20% to mental attribute. Effect diminishes for Tier 1 and above. Effect 3. Entering a dream special consumes at least 30 spirit points. Allows free entry and exit from the current dream. Baiye's lips curled slightly as he thought to himself that those mercenaries were like beggars with a golden rice bowl in their hands. They could have easily gotten out by using this crystal, but they didn't know how, thus giving it away to him for nothing. It's a Tier 1 perfect quality item, and it's even an upgradable item. Although the item information doesn't say how it upgrades, we'll figure it out eventually. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away from St. Mary's Hospital, in a dark and damp corner of a hospital, an old man with gray hair and glasses was sitting at a desk piled high with documents and instruments. As if suddenly sensing something, a light flashed in his cloudy eyes, and he muttered to himself, "Has the core sample of the small dream we left behind finally appeared?" As he spoke, he slowly stood up, his body slightly hunched, but the aura he exuded was enough to command respect. He slowly walked to the window, gazing at the gloomy sky outside, his eyes revealing eagerness and greed. He had cultivated St. Mary's Hospital as a miniature dream for so long, his purpose being to obtain this so-called core sample. Now that it had appeared, he was determined to get his hands on it no matter what. The scene shifts to the area below the cold storage, which resembles a hellish abyss. Countless lifelike corpses are neatly arranged, making it more like a morgue than a cold storage facility. Among these corpses, one medium-sized male body suddenly opened its tightly closed eyes, which flashed with an eerie red light. Immediately afterwards, it felt as if she was being pulled by some invisible force, and she slowly floated up. In its mind, an order had been issued at some unknown time. Go, kill the intruders and retrieve the core sample. The corpse nodded like a robot, a faint light emanating from its body. and then it flashed and rushed towards Baiye and Laozhang. It moved so fast that it stirred up a biting, cold wind, freezing everything in its path, as if even the air itself had been frozen solid. After reviewing the item information of the dream crystal, Baiye noticed a gaze simultaneously falling on the experimental report in his left hand. Looking up, I saw that old Zhang was intently memorizing the contents, seemingly trying to memorize all the information so he could report back to his superiors later. Seeing this, Baiye said to him, "Hey Lao Zhang, as an investigator, don't you have anything on you that you can use to take pictures? I can't give you the original, but I don't mind taking pictures." Old Zhang's eyes lit up. "Mr. Bai, are you serious?" Baiye shrugged, "Taking some photos won't erase the original content. Go ahead and take them. Besides, you put in a lot of effort just now. We can't leave you without even a sip of the soup." Without further ado, old Zhang took the stack of documents from Baiye and placed them on a fairly clean workbench. He used a tactical flashlight to provide light and a miniature camera to take pictures. Before he could finish filming, Baiye frowned slightly and looked in a certain direction. From there, he sensed a powerful aura approaching. So he whispered a reminder, "Old Zhang, hurry, something's coming, it's very strong." Upon hearing this, old Zhang's eyes sharpened, and he quickly sped up his photography, soon finishing taking pictures of all the materials and handing them back to Baiye. "What's wrong, Mr. Baiye?" Baiye said, "I just tried manipulating this core sample, and I could vaguely sense something very powerful approaching us, even stronger than the guardian of that cold storage. So you need to get out of here immediately." Old Zhang noticed the other person's choice of words and paused for a moment. "Mr. Bai, aren't you coming with me?" Baiye shook his head. "That guy is probably after the core sample. Let's split up." Seemingly remembering something, he continued, "By the way, when I was manipulating the core sample just now, I vaguely sensed the presence of several living people in the direction of the cold storage. They might be the missing persons you're looking for. If you want to rescue them, you can go there now, because the mutants lingering near the cold storage, including that big guy, are also heading this way. You should be able to avoid them by going around them." Hearing this, old Zhang wasn't one to dawdle. He nodded firmly and said, "All right, then I won't stay and hold you back, Mr. Bai. Please take good care of yourself." As he spoke, he pulled out a frosted card and handed it to Baiye. "Also, this is my business card from the Special Investigation Bureau. If you need any help from me or the Special Investigation Bureau after we get out, Mr. Bai, please feel free to give me a call." Baiye glanced at it, then casually stuffed it into his pocket. "Okay. 30 seconds left, you'd better hurry up and leave. Whether you manage to rescue those missing people or not, you'd better leave the dream within 10 minutes, otherwise I can't guarantee your safety." After giving one last instruction, old Zhang took off running and soon left the rehabilitation center, taking a long detour to the cold storage to rescue the person. Baiye stood still, closed his eyes to rest, and awaited the impending danger. Less than 20 seconds after Lao Zhang left, the corpse appeared in front of Baiye. Baiye slowly opened his eyes, looked at the person in front of him, and sighed inwardly. It really was him. In that original record of human experimentation, the first truly successful experimental subject, even stronger than the T-15, was the T-19. At this moment, T-19 appeared before him in the form of a normal human, completely naked, with a sickly grayish-white sheen on its body. With each movement he made, the luster seemed to peel away as if tiny specks of light were falling off, like phosphorescence clinging to rotting wood and about to vanish. His facial features were sharply defined, every muscle line as if sculpted with the most precise carving knife, yet it only added to the sense of horror. At the same time, the system panel quietly appeared before Baiye's eyes. Variant Psychic T-19 Tier 1 Boss Unit. Reference Level LV-18. Status Calm. Attributes: Strength 58, Agility 62, Constitution 58, Spirit 78, Physical Attack 40-52, Physical Resistance 18-55, Magic Resistance 42-68, Spirit Resistance 66-78, Movement Speed 36-60. Health Points: 1680 1740. Spirit Value 2890 3120. Energy Value 1380 1500. Stamina 95 105. Sanity 1260 1280. Specialties: Flesh and Blood Shaping, Exceptional Psychic Abilities, Exceptional Perfect Human Proportions, Excellent Basic Mental Resistance, Excellent. Skills: Tier 2 Mental Storm, Intermediate, Tier 2 Mental Assassination, Intermediate, Tier 2 Mental Barrier, Intermediate, Tier 1 Object Manipulation, Advanced, Tier 1 Shadow Strike, Advanced, Tier 1 Phantom Kick, Intermediate. Baiye stared at the string of data presented by the other party, secretly marveling at it. He had some doubts before, because the information clearly stated that when Li Jiangguo and those mysterious people transferred the experimental subjects, they left behind T07, T12, T15, and T19. Another document clearly states that the T19 should be the strongest experimental subject, so how did the T15 become the boss? Turns out, T15 was just a mini-boss. There's a real big boss in this dungeon. However, this T19's stats are ridiculously overpowered. Not only is its spirit attribute extremely outstanding, but its agility far surpasses that of the cold storage guardian T15 we encountered before. Although its strength and physique are slightly lower than the T15, its overall strength is still terrifyingly formidable. Moreover, judging from its skill list, its various offensive and unpredictable skills make one's outlook worrying. Baiye slowly raised the long sword in his hand, assuming a fighting stance. But buddy, don't you know that exposing your body in public violates public order regulations? Well, a hospital is definitely a public place, isn't it? Taking advantage of the fact that no one else was around, Baiye, who was already somewhat reserved, completely let loose and started spouting lewd remarks. But the T-19 completely ignored Baiye's nonsense and launched an attack before he could even finish speaking. He waved his hands rapidly, the movements seemingly casual, yet they stirred up a black current of air, and then countless experimental debris floated into the air. The debris varied in size, some as large as a safe, others about the size of a palm. Like bullets imbued with life, they hurtled towards Baiye. Oh, getting angry now, having an exhibitionist streak isn't your fault. After all, this is a mental hospital, and we all respect your little quirks. While using his verbal skills, Baiye continuously slashed at the incoming objects with his long sword. Each collision of the blade and the wreckage sent sparks flying, accompanied by a crisp clanging sound, like the rapid drum beats of a storm. The slightly older boy dodged with a peculiar footwork that appeared chaotic but was in fact exquisitely skillful. He first moved sideways with a seemingly casual sliding step, but his center of gravity kept shifting, like a leaf fluttering in the wind, seemingly without any pattern but always cleverly avoiding attacks. Hey, you're not entirely emotionless after all, are you? Your aim was off just now. The reason Baiye wanted to try to use persuasion to expose a weakness in the other party was to test whether this seemingly non-mutant guy could still be considered human. It now seems that although the new guy has lost his mind, he still retains a basic human sense of shame. He originally intended to take advantage of the moment when he was distracted by T-19's persuasive words to get close enough to stab it. However, the enemy's ranged attacks were too dense, and countless pieces of debris completely sealed off the space around Baiye, leaving him no chance to take advantage. Moreover, its mental energy seems inexhaustible. Even though this ability to manipulate objects through mental energy should consume a large amount of mental energy. But thanks to the opponent's terrifying recovery rate, my mental strength barely dropped at all. If things continue like this, Baiye will definitely lose. Tusk, psychic abilities. So the extraordinary abilities in this world belong to the superpower system. While pondering, Baiye dodged the opponent's attacks. He realized that this guy didn't intend to kill him, but wanted to slowly wear him down in this way. The purpose was obvious. Since Baiye had put the dream crystal into his inventory, the other party could no longer sense it, so they wanted to capture him alive and force him to hand over the crystal. But Baiye only managed to hold his own against it for less than a minute when suddenly, a figure as large as a tank appeared at the doorway. But when Baiye saw this enormous mutant, he didn't panic. Instead, he smiled. Just now, Baiye had used the dream crystal to control the T-15, causing it to leave the cold storage and arrive here to launch a surprise attack on the T-19. Although it's unclear why the T-19 wasn't controlled by the White Knight Dream Crystal. Fortunately, all the other mutants, including the T-15, were within his control. Haha, now I've finally arrived at my home turf. After being brought under control, the T-15 seemed to have lost its previous consciousness and rationality. Its body charged toward the T-19 in a seemingly clumsy, yet incredibly direct manner. Each step he took caused the ground around him to tremble slightly, raising a small cloud of dust. Its muscles bulged like pythons with bulging veins, exuding a primal and violent power. The T-19 seemed caught off guard by the sudden attack from behind. A look of surprise crossed its face as it saw the T-15 charging towards it. But it quickly regained its composure and launched a mental assassination attack. A visible ring of black spiritual energy shot towards T-15's brow at an extremely fast speed. But the T-15 seemed oblivious to these mental attacks. The decrease in mental strength after being hit made it even more insane. Maintaining its charging stance just before impacting the T-19, it raised its arm high, its muscular arm resembling a thick tree trunk, slamming down on the T-19 with a whistling sound. Although the T-19 is 2 levels higher than the T-15, it, known for its spirit, instinctively does not want to engage in a direct confrontation with the T-15. So just as the T-15's devastating punch was about to strike it, the T-19 reacted swiftly, its hands moving rapidly in front of it, its fingertips flashing with a dark light. These lights quickly intertwined and spread, forming a mental barrier exuding an eerie aura in the blink of an eye. This barrier is no ordinary defensive measure. It appears to be woven from countless fine black threads, with a mysterious spiritual power subtly flowing between them. When the T-15's heavy punch slammed into the mental barrier, the entire barrier trembled violently, and dark light surged and undulated like a tide at the point of impact. However, the seemingly indestructible force of the fist could not penetrate this seemingly illusory defense in the face of this mysterious spiritual power. But just when things seemed to be at a stalemate, the T-19 suddenly sensed a dangerous aura approaching from its side. It turned out that during the stalemate between the T-15 and T-19, Baiye seized the opportunity and launched his most efficient assault skill. He moved with lightning speed, relying on the experience he had accumulated in battles in his previous life and his agile footwork, and before the T-19 could fully react, he had already ghost-like arrived at its close range. A hint of a smile flashed in Baiye's eyes. The long sword in his hand, imbued with a chilling sword intent, slashed down with an aura capable of tearing through space. This strike contained all his power. The blade's light instantly intensified, piercing directly through the seemingly indestructible mental barrier. The blade slashed a horrific wound precisely into the T-19's chest, and blood gushed out like a fountain, soaking the already blood-soaked ground beneath its feet. The T-19 arched its body instantly after being slashed, as if enduring the most unbearable pain in the world. It let out an unusually strange scream, a sound filled with resentment, pain, and rage, like a roar from the depths of hell, making the surrounding air buzz. Just as Baiye was preparing to press his advantage and deliver another fatal blow to the T-19, the situation suddenly took a dramatic turn. The T-19, being a level 18 boss unit, still possessed terrifying combat instincts even after losing its sanity. In the instant it suffered heavy damage, it finally came to its senses. The T-19's eyes blazed with a bright red light, as if burning with flames that threatened to destroy everything. It quickly raised its hands and waved them wildly above its head, muttering incantations in a tone filled with madness and desperation. As he moved, the surrounding darkness rapidly gathered, forming a huge black sphere above his head. The black sphere gradually solidified, radiating a powerful and chilling energy. The intense mental pressure made Baiye's heart tighten. Before he could react further, T-19 swung his hands downwards, and the solid black sphere instantly exploded, transforming into a tangible mental storm that swept towards Baiye and T-15 with overwhelming force. This mental storm was like a surging tsunami, distorting and stretching space wherever it passed. Baiye felt a tremendous force slam into him, and he was sent flying backward like a kite with a broken string. The T-15, which was also hit by the mental storm, was even more unable to withstand this powerful mental attack, because its own mental strength was relatively weak to begin with. Its mind was severely impacted. It felt as if countless sharp needles were piercing its brain, and its reason was thrown into chaos in an instant. Baiye, however, seemed completely unaffected by the mental storm. After all, his mental resistance of over 1,000 was no joke, even at this level. So I can only rely on materializing my mental energy to repel him. As the mental storm gradually dissipated, Baiye slowly stood up, gazing at the chaotic battlefield and the disorganized T-15s before him. After repelling 2 enemies, the T-19 intended to press its advantage and eliminate these 2 troublesome opponents in one fell swoop. However, seeing Baiye's nonchalant demeanor stirred a sense of unease within it. Just as it was considering whether to launch a more powerful attack to consolidate its gains, the T-19 suddenly became acutely aware of the change in the surrounding atmosphere. In the previously quiet environment, a series of noisy footsteps and low roars could be faintly heard, as if something was rapidly approaching. Other mutant monsters arrived, surging in from all directions like a tide. These monsters come in all shapes and sizes. Some are as elusive as ghosts, while others are as large as giants, exuding a chilling aura. Baiye stood there smiling and said, "I told you this is my home turf." Although controlling these mutants through the dream crystal was a considerable mental burden for him, his meditation skills were also being restored at full capacity, multitasking as he worked. In comparison, he felt the T-19 would be the first to give out. The instant Baiye finished speaking, all the mutants began their attack on the T-19. They surrounded the T-19, their eyes revealing a bloodthirsty desire, as if they had sensed some invisible call and launched a siege against the T-19. The T-19's seemingly impenetrable mental barrier began to crumble under the coordinated attack of these dozen or so mutants. Their attack methods are varied. Some emit sharp whistling sounds in an attempt to disrupt the T-19's mental defenses. Some, relying on their powerful physical attacks, continuously assaulted the mental barrier, each impact causing ripples to spread across it. Seeing the lively scene, Baiye couldn't help but chuckle. Hey. Area of effect attacks have cooldowns. After a brief period of chaos, the T-15s finally calmed down. It turned its head to look at the culprit, the T-19, that had caused it such a severe headache, its eyes filled with anger and hatred. The painful memory of being tormented by psychological attacks temporarily extinguished its rationality, allowing it to be dominated by rage. Roar. The T-15 let out a roar, its muscles bulging once more as if it contained boundless power. It leaped high into the air, its massive body blotting out the sky, and with a destructive force it unleashed a furious punch at the T-19. With a crisp crack, the T-19's mental barrier finally cracked under the powerful impact, and the crack quickly spread. Immediately afterwards, the T-15 unleashed its skill, continuously firing aura. It turns out that the rageous rampage mentioned in its skill description refers to this chaotic attack style. Baiye thought to himself, aren't you a veteran, so this is your military boxing. Under T-15's 18 punches in 3 seconds, and the combined attack of other mutant minions, the mental barrier could no longer hold and shattered. The force sent the T-19 flying, its body slamming into the wall with a bang, as if it had been launched by a cannonball. The wall collapsed with a crash upon impact, sending bricks and stones flying everywhere. The mutated minions swarmed forward, attempting to tear the fallen T-19 to shreds. They surged forward from all directions, their sharp claws and fangs gleaming coldly in the darkness, like a pack of hungry wolves pouncing on their prey. However, T-19 was after all the biggest boss in this instance, and faced with such a situation, a sharp glint suddenly flashed in its blood-red eyes. Its skill, Mental Storm, doesn't have a cooldown as Baiye claimed, but casting a skill of this level is still a considerable burden for it. If used continuously, it will inevitably consume a lot of mental energy, causing its recovery efficiency to gradually fall behind the consumption. But it knew that if it didn't defeat the ants before they swarmed over, death would be its only fate. Therefore, at the critical moment, T-19 disregarded its severe physical injuries and mental exhaustion, and forcibly activated the mental power within its body. He quickly formed hand seals again, chanting incantations, and the surrounding dark energy gathered wildly once more. In the blink of an eye, an even more powerful mental storm arose out of nowhere, its terrifying aura seemingly threatening to devour the entire space. Wherever the mental storm passed, everything was mercilessly swept away. Those originally menacing mutant monsters were blasted away by the powerful force of the mental storm. These mutants, already possessing weak mental resistance, were further weakened by T-19's full-force mental storm. Even without experiencing a mental breakdown, they were still groaning in pain after falling to the ground, and some even fainted. The T-15 was once again thrown into chaos by the mental shock. But it was, after all, a boss unit, and not so easily defeated by the same move. Having already briefly developed resistance to mental attacks after the previous blow, it was only confused for a moment before its eyes gradually showed signs of recovery. However, one would argue that the T-19 truly lives up to its reputation as the ultimate boss. Facing a mini-boss and so many minions, as long as you pay a certain price, you can almost clear the entire area with a single attack. Under the cover of the mental storm, T-19 struggled to his feet, his figure appearing and disappearing in the darkness. Even though he was bleeding profusely from the T-15's attack, his domineering aura still lingered, making him someone not to be underestimated. But before it could even enjoy its moment of glory, an extremely impolite voice rang in its ears. "Are you pretending to be your mother?" Taking advantage of the gap between the T-19's skill recovery animation and the break in the mental barrier, Baiye seized this rare opportunity. His figure approached like a ghost in an instant, his right hand raised high, gripping the long sword that gleamed with a chilling light brought down with unstoppable momentum. Ding. Congratulations on your first mastery of the special skill Blade in 10 of Slash, gaining 56 potential points. Ding. Congratulations on your first mastery of the Tier 3 skill Divine Firmament Slash, gaining 56 potential points. This strike seemed to gather all of Baiye's strength and will. A surge of sword intent sliced through the air, emitting a sharp whistling sound. Its speed was so great that it was like a shooting star that streaked across the night sky, striking the T-19 squarely in the back of the head. A loud crack was heard, as if a hard skull had been shattered by brute force. That strike nearly chopped off half of the opponent's head. The T-19's head exploded like a watermelon struck by a heavy hammer, its brains spilling out and blood gushing out like a fountain, staining the surrounding ground red. The horrific scene was chilling. Unfortunately, this guy's health bar is just too thick. As a being with extraordinary physical specialization flesh-shaping, T-19 won't die easily even if it's hit in a fatal spot. Even so, this blow still cleaved T-19's brains out, severely injuring it on the spot. An uncontrollable mental storm spread wildly in all directions, and the dark aura surged like a tidal wave, enveloping the entire space in an eerie atmosphere. Despite possessing extremely high mental resistance, Baiye, who was on the offensive, was finding it difficult to completely withstand the powerful mental storm. That powerful force was like an invisible hand, violently throwing him away. Baiye's body traced an arc in the air, crashing heavily into a wall like a kite with a broken string. The wall collapsed with a crash under his impact, bricks and stones flew everywhere, and he fell heavily to the ground, spitting out a mouthful of blood, feeling dizzy for a moment. When Baiye slowly awoke, he was met with a scene of utter chaos. The ground was covered in blood and broken bricks. The mutated monsters were staggering about, some even torn to pieces by the mental storm. Just as Baiye was about to step forward again to finish him off, an aged roar suddenly rang out. Enough. The roar seemed to contain boundless majesty, like a resounding bell making Baiye's ears ring. Immediately afterwards, an even more powerful pressure erupted from the T-19, spreading outwards like surging waves. To Baiye's astonishment, T-19's health points had begun to recover continuously, increasing at an astonishing rate every second. And its spiritual energy recovered at an unimaginable speed. Not only that, but within just a few seconds, the T-19 instantly leveled up to level 20. His four-dimensional attributes, especially his mental strength, have now exceeded 100 points. This is clearly at the mental level of a second-tier mage player. Baiye hissed instinctively, unable to resist complaining, "Hiss, you're this strong in the second phase. What the hell is the point of fighting like this?" But he quickly realized that this was not the second phase of the boss, but rather a higher-ranking being that had descended upon T-19 in the form of a spiritual entity. At that moment, the surrounding air seemed to freeze, filled with a suffocating sense of oppression. Baiye dusted himself off, slowly stood up, his gaze fixed on the T-19 that had risen again, pondering a countermeasure. That higher-ranking being, existing in the form of a spiritual entity, stood silently inside T-19's body, surrounded by black mist, obscuring its true form. However, the powerful aura emanating from it undoubtedly far exceeded Baiye's expectations. As Baiye slowly met T-19's gaze, a naked, aged figure slowly appeared on the other's forehead. The other person had just said, "Foolish fellow, you've angered." Before he could finish showing off, Baiye pointed at him and exclaimed, pretending to be a bystander, "I was wondering why T-19 doesn't like wearing clothes. It turns out that like father like son, here comes another old pervert. Tusk tusk tusk, it's a pity I didn't ask Lao Zhang to leave a camera. Otherwise I would definitely have filmed it and posted it online, which would have given netizens a good laugh. It might even trend on social media. I've already come up with a title. Shocking, naked old man appears in mysterious space, the truth behind it is shocking." The other person was somewhat bewildered and just retorted, "Nonsense." Then Baiye interrupted him again, waving his hand and saying with a regretful look, "Hey, it's not your fault that you have an exhibitionist tendency. After all, you're getting on in years. Who knows, you might just kick the bucket any day. Whether you die from exhibitionism or not is a matter for you afterward. But little 19 is still young. Look at her, she has a long road ahead of her. If this quirk of hers were posted online by someone as amusing as me, she'd probably be laughed at for the rest of her life." Upon hearing this, the other person couldn't help but inwardly complain. "What the hell is it that you, this clown, posted this online? Why didn't you just not post it?" But then he realized he'd been tricked by Baiye, and quickly burrowed into the T-19's body, saying with a grim expression, "Kid, if you don't want to die, hand over the course sample." Baiye chuckled and pointed at him, looking amused. "Look shy, everyone else is shameless in their old age, how come you're still shy at your age?" Then he scratched his head and said, "Don't be in such a hurry, old man. Look at your great abilities, why are you competing with a mere kid like me? I've been wondering, why did you have to choose the T-19 as the carrier for your spiritual body? Look at its big, clumsy appearance, it's not even very agile. If you were to possess my body, that would be wonderful. I'm agile and quick-witted. I could easily carry you around this dream world. Besides, what do you need this core sample for? Why don't you explain it to me? Maybe I'll be so impressed that I'll give you a tip on the spur of the moment. The mysterious spirit within T19 was nearly furious, its beard bristling and eyes bulging. What the hell is this reward? Do you think I'm some kind of storyteller in a tea house? The being snorted coldly and said, enough nonsense, you don't need to know. Hand it over obediently and I'll spare your life. Baiye persisted, wait a minute. We're having such a good chat, I'm just curious, how long have you been in this dream world? Were you bored enough to come out naked looking for some excitement? Why don't you share your story with me? I'll promote it and make you famous online too. Actually, Baiye's rapid-fire banter this time wasn't because he was particularly talkative, or because he just wanted to chat with someone whenever he had the chance to be alone. His main purpose in doing this was to buy some precious time for Lao Zhang. Looking back, while my fighting pace was incredibly fast, in less than 10 minutes I had already crippled the original boss. But who would have thought that after beating the younger one, an older one would immediately appear? It wouldn't be fair to say that Baiye was completely outmatched by this old man who suddenly appeared before him. After all, this old B*********, like T19, also appears to be a mental superhuman. With his current mental resistance, he wouldn't be afraid of anyone who wasn't at least at the 3rd level. At most, they would only be somewhat embarrassed by his physical attacks, which he used to manipulate objects with his mental power. But if you really go all out, even if you win by sheer luck, you'll at least pay a heavy price, and you might have to stay in bed for 10 days or half a month to recover. So, after thinking it over, he decided it was better to stall for time and wait for the system to notify him that old Zhang had successfully left the dream. He figured there was no need to fight this troublesome guy to the death. He could just use the dream crystal to slip away. Just as he finished speaking and was pondering what topic to bring up to continue stalling, the familiar system notification sounded precisely in his ear. Ding. Congratulations to player Moonlit Sky for completing the hidden quest. Find the 3 investigators sent by the authorities to St. Mary's Mental Hospital and safely escort them out of the instance before dawn. Current progress 3/3. Baiye quickly calculated the time, 8 minutes and 26 seconds. Wow, not bad, Lao Zhang, that's top-notch efficiency. At this moment, he had no more worries. He could leave whenever he wanted. However, with the dream crystal as a backup plan for leaving the instance, Baiye's adventurous spirit kicked in and he decided to take a risk. At this moment, Baiye did not slip away as planned. Instead, his eyes sharpened instantly, and without saying a word, he grabbed the long sword that gleamed with a chilling light. He flashed forward, moving with the speed of a ghost, leaving only a blur in his wake. Upon seeing Baiye's actions, the other party merely snorted coldly, neither dodging nor avoiding, as if certain that Baiye could not cause him any substantial harm. He then erected a mental barrier emitting a faint glow. Seeing this, Baiye grinned and revealed a mocking smile, thinking that this old thing probably didn't see the powerful blow he delivered to the T19 earlier, ignoring its defenses. Otherwise, they certainly wouldn't be so arrogant as to stand still and wait to be cut down. At that moment, Baiye took a deep breath, and a powerful sword aura mixed with sharp sword intent was once again continuously poured into the longsword. Ding, congratulations on your first mastery of the special skill, Heavenly Blade Stance, gaining 48 potential points. Skill Heavenly Blade Stance. Rank 1st rank 5th rank can be freely controlled. Proficiency level. Beginners. Skill cost 200 spirit points. Minimum, the more spirit points you inject, the more powerful your blade will be. Skill animation delay. 1 second minimum, the longer the charge, the stronger the momentum. Skill cooldown. 10 seconds, mainly to relieve some mental stress. Skill effect 1, the power of heavens collapse active. The heavens seem to collapse, drawing strength from the earth and sky, increasing power by 800%. Minimum. Skill effect 2, Heavenly Might passive. When you use Heavenly Collapse Blade technique, your enemies will briefly face the overwhelming power of collapsing heaven and earth, falling into a state of temporary disorientation. Skill effect 3, Negative effect. Cataclysm special. Due to absorbing a force far exceeding your own strength, you suffer a backlash damage equal to 400% minimum of your own strength. After recovering from the injury, your strength and constitution attributes are slightly increased. This strike almost gathered the strongest power Baiye could unleash at the moment. He seemed to become one with the longsword, and his aura rose steadily. Feeling the overwhelming, earth-shattering power emanating from the other party, Li Jiangguo's pupils contracted, and he was momentarily stunned. By the time they wanted to take cover, it was too late. Baiye's longsword, imbued with overwhelming power, struck the mental barrier like a bolt of lightning cleaving through the darkness. Shockingly, this seemingly indestructible mental barrier failed to offer the slightest resistance to Baiye's fierce strike, which bypassed it entirely and struck the T-19's body. Li Jiangguo had no chance to avoid this blow and was cut in half at the waist. If the opponent hadn't tried to dodge by leaping to the side, Baiye would probably have already sliced him in half vertically. In an instant, a scream far more painful than that of the T-19 echoed throughout the entire space. The sound was so real that it caused ripples in the surrounding air, as if the entire dream was trembling because of the scream. Driven by the momentum of the blade, Li Jiangguo's two halves of his body slammed heavily against the wall in the distance, like a cannonball being launched into the air. In an instant, the wall collapsed. Bricks and stones flew everywhere. A cloud of dust rose. Baiye did not give up. Taking advantage of the opponent's injury, he flashed away and chased after him again. The other party was now filled with terror, all traces of their previous composure and arrogance gone. While using their mental power to reassemble the two bodies, they roared at Baiye, You dare. Baiye wasn't about to give him a chance to catch his breath. Waving his longsword, he said mockingly, Oh, weren't you pretty arrogant just now? Why are you chickening out now? I'd like to see how many blows you can take, you old bones. Having said that, he brought the knife down again with a fierce slash. The opponent exerted all their strength to condense a weak mental shield in an attempt to withstand Baiye's fierce attack. However, under Baiye's sword intent, this mental barrier was like air, completely ineffective in blocking anything. At this critical moment, a strange fluctuation suddenly appeared in the surrounding space, and the body of the T-19 possessed by the old man inexplicably appeared 30 meters behind Baiye. Furthermore, the body, which had been cut in half at the waist, had quietly regenerated, leaving only a hideous and terrifying scar. Baiye slowly turned around, narrowed his eyes, and teleported. Good heavens, this old man has this ability. A brief silence fell over the room. The other person spoke again quickly, and his words still carried that same strong air of pretentiousness. Young man, your strength has indeed exceeded my expectations. But do you think the same tactics will still work on me? How about I give you a choice? Hand over the core sample now, then leave, and I can forgive and forget what happened before. Baiye wasn't about to fall for that, and retorted without hesitation. Old man, what are you pretending for? That teleportation just now probably used up most of your mental energy, didn't it? And don't think I didn't notice. Your two body parts aren't completely connected, are they? If I were to strike again, I wonder how you would respond. The old man's lips twitched slightly, but he maintained a composed expression, saying calmly, Hess, dodging your blade again wouldn't be difficult for me. I just wonder if you still have the strength to swing your blade again. You paid a considerable price to do that, didn't you? As he spoke, the old man watched Baiye's body, which was constantly cracking due to the backlash from the heavenly swaying blade, with a mocking look in his eyes. Baiye chuckled and cast a healing spell. The shattered body recovered at a visible speed, fully restoring itself in just a few breaths, leaving only dripping blood. He admitted that the backlash from that attack was indeed very damaging. He lost 40% of his health in an instant and almost screamed in pain. But he endured the pain and still had the strength to unleash another slash without any sword force. But now he's a priest after all. Given his proficiency in healing spells, plus the fact that he's inherently fragile, he has the ability to heal. One treatment and the enemy's health was fully restored. The old man nearly popped his eyes out when he saw this. Holy crap, this is unbelievable. Over the years, he had witnessed many extraordinary things, but this was the first time he had ever seen such an abnormal recovery ability. Baiye, his eyes gleaming with eager anticipation, defiantly replied, How about we give it a try? The old man's heart skipped a beat. What a joke, he thought, that last slash almost killed me. Another one, and this part of my spirit would be gone on the spot. Left with no other option, he reluctantly proposed a collaboration. Young man, how about we cooperate? Just give me the core samples, and I can meet any needs you may have. Baiye's eyes darted around, and he deliberately said, I'm quite interested in that girl called Dreamweaver. How about this, you send Dreamweaver to me, and I'll give you the core sample. He had noticed it long ago. Although the old man's appearance had changed quite a bit, his temperament and eyes were exactly the same as Li Jiangguo's. This old man is definitely one of the key figures who orchestrated all of this, Li Jiangguo. The old man, or rather Li Jiangguo, almost couldn't help but curse. This kid really dared to ask for an exorbitant amount. 100 core samples couldn't compare to one dreamer. But he suppressed his anger and said nonchalantly, Let's change your request. Whether it's money, status, or fame, I can give it to you. Baiye couldn't help but complain, Are you acting out One Piece here? Are you going to say next, You left all of these in Laugh Tale and you want me to go out to sea to find them? Li Jiangguo's face darkened. His heart filled with anger, but he couldn't lash out since he still needed to get the core sample from Baiye. He forced a smile and said, "Young man, stop joking. Make a more realistic request, and as long as it's within my ability, I'll definitely fulfill it." Baiye stroked his chin, pretending to think, but in his heart he was calculating how to continue to manipulate the old fox in front of him. After a moment he slowly spoke. "All right, I won't beat around the bush anymore. I want you to tell me all the secrets behind St. Mary's Mental Hospital, including the operating model of your organization, its purpose, and the list of all those involved. After you've told me all that, I'll consider giving you the core sample." Li Jiangguo's face instantly turned extremely ugly. Baiyi's request was tantamount to asking him to expose the entire organization. He gritted his teeth and said, "Your request is too much. It concerns the interests of too many people. I cannot agree to it." Baiyi shrugged and said indifferently, "Well, there's nothing I can do then. It seems our cooperation is off. In that case, let's continue fighting and see if your mental energy runs out first, or if my blade cleaves you in two." As he spoke, he gripped the long, gleaming sword in his hand once more, and his aura surged once more. Li Jiangguo inwardly groaned, knowing full well that Baiyi was a man of his word. If the fight continues, I'm afraid my chances of survival are slim. But Baiyi's request was something he found hard to accept, leaving him conflicted and beads of sweat forming on his forehead. But Baiyi didn't give him a chance at all, coldly starting to count down, 3, 2. As he counted, his aura grew stronger and stronger. Li Jiangguo quickly interrupted, "Fine, I'll talk. First, dissipate that aura." Baiyi pursed his lips, dissipating his imposing aura, and glanced almost imperceptibly at the hands behind the other person's back. "The old man told me to stop charging up, but he himself was borrowing more power from his main body to charge up. He probably had murderous intent towards me and wanted to kill me instantly. But he wasn't flustered at all, because according to the description of the dream crystal, this thing could leave the dream instantly with just a thought. He wanted to see whether the old man's ultimate move was faster or his own thought was faster." Li Jiangguo sighed helplessly and began to slowly recount his story. "Our organization has a vast and complex network of interests behind it. Its operation involves the allocation of various resources and clandestine transactions. The goal is to manipulate dreams to gain superhuman power, thereby controlling more resources and power." Halfway through his sentence, Baiyi impatiently interrupted, "Get to the point, what's the name of your lousy organization?" Li Jiangguo's face darkened, and after a moment's hesitation he said, "The Other Shore Flower." That organization's name is the Other Shore Flower. It's an organization dedicated to evolving all of humanity through its own methods, sending them to the other side. Baiyi glanced at him sideways and said sarcastically, "A mere villainous organization, engaging in illegal and criminal activities, yet they manage to give themselves a high-sounding reason. They've got some nerve." Just as the other party was about to become angry, Baiyi interrupted her directly, "Continue. What exactly is this dream weaver girl all about? And how did you discover that she has the ability to change reality through dreams?" Li Jiangguo snorted, then said, "The dream weaver is nominally my granddaughter, a girl adopted by my daughter and son-in-law named Lin Qingqing. I remember it was when she was 14 years old. One time, the family's cat accidentally fell off the windowsill and died. The whole family was very sad, especially Lin Qingqing, who cried very hard. That night, my daughter and son-in-law woke up in the middle of the night to find the dead cat alive and well in the living room. The whole family was startled. After further observation, it was discovered that whenever Lin Qingqing had nightmares or became particularly emotional, strange phenomena would occur around her, such as objects appearing out of thin air or the positions of certain things changing inexplicably. I sensed something was wrong, so I secretly arranged for people to observe and test her more closely. That's when I discovered that she could actually change reality through her dreams. In order to make better use of her abilities, I cruelly imprisoned my daughter and son-in-law, and then tricked Lin Qingqing, telling her that as long as she cooperated in doing some things, her parents could come back. Although the child was chronologically 14 years old, his mental age was only equivalent to that of an 8-year-old. He was very naive and of course had no suspicions, so he cooperated with us in the experiment." Baiyi sneered, mocking, "Brother Li is truly a hero of our time. He'll stop at nothing to achieve his goals, even imprisoning his own daughter and son-in-law. I thought you were a good person hiding something after reading Dr. Wang Lihua's diary, but it turns out you're a pure villain." Li Jiangguo rolled his eyes inwardly, almost unable to resist complaining. "Can you please stop using reduplicated words here?" On the surface, he completely ignored Baiyi's sarcasm and continued, Back in the organization, I was just a minor figure in charge of the experimental process, with no real status. The two doctors were working with me, so naturally I had to find a way to get them on my side to ensure the experiment went smoothly, and also to give myself some support. But that idiot Wang Lihua never learns her lesson. She always acts on her own, ruining countless things. Now she's been dealt with by the organization and has become a complete madwoman. It's all her own fault. Baiye raised an eyebrow, ignoring his question about Wang Lihua, and instead changed the subject, continuing to press on the core sample. Speaking of the core sample, since you've been in charge of the experiment, how come you haven't obtained it yet? Have you been deliberately letting things slide all these years? Li Jiangguo looked helpless and said with a wry smile, how could I dare to deliberately go easy on her? The dream Lin Qingqing created needs time to evolve. Every time a core sample appears, the organization's top management forcibly takes it away for various reasons, and I never get a chance to get one. Moreover, the conditions for generating this dream core are extremely demanding. If one is not careful, the entire dream will be ruined. In the past, many times all efforts have been in vain. This dream of St. Mary's Hospital was something I painstakingly created, secretly using Lin Qingqing and without the organization's knowledge, hoping to obtain a core sample to enhance my abilities. But instead, I ran into you. No sooner had he finished speaking than Li Jiangguo made a sudden move, sending a spiritual entity directly into Baiye's brow with lightning speed. Baiye exclaimed in surprise, hey, aren't you a little too impatient? However, sensing that the other party seemed to want to possess him, he instantly calmed down, a cold smile appearing on his lips. In Baiye's spiritual sea, there was a vast and boundless expanse, as profound and mysterious as the cosmos. The scattered points of spiritual light twinkled like stars, their shifting rays outlining dreamlike and fantastical patterns, seemingly containing endless mysteries. In the center, an ancient hall, radiating a soft glow, appears and disappears, sacred and solemn. Li Jiangguo laughed wildly. Kid, you've fallen for my trick. Once I extract your soul, I'll show you what cruelty truly means. But no sooner had the words left his lips than a gentle yet extremely majestic voice resounded from Baiye's spiritual sea. This place outsiders are forbidden. The sound, like a resounding bell, echoed in every inch of the mental sea, causing the surrounding light to flicker violently. Li Jiangguo's face changed drastically and he shouted in terror, what the hell is this thing? However, his voice was instantly drowned out by a tremendous force. The ancient hall shone brightly, and a dazzling pillar of light shot into the sky, directly engulfing Li Jiangguo's consciousness. In the blink of an eye, his entire consciousness was completely erased. Only a large amount of spiritual power remained in Baiye's spiritual sea, like a shining nebula, slowly merging into the surrounding light. Ding. You have defeated the dungeon creature, Li Jiangguo's spirit entity, level 20 boss unit, and gained 10,080 experience points. Sensing Li Jiangguo's consciousness disappear from his mental sea, Baiye scoffed. Why did you have to try and possess me? Why don't you take a P***s and look in the mirror? What a pathetic sight you are. If the opponent had used some other supernatural power, it wouldn't be a problem. But unfortunately, he's a psychic. His mental resistance is nearly 1,000, isn't that a natural counter to them? If it weren't for the fact that the other party possessed the ability to materialize mental energy, which could cause physical damage, he wouldn't even bother to glance at them. Meanwhile, where Li Jiangguo's true form was, there was an old man whose hair and beard were meticulously groomed, and who was dressed in proper researcher's attire, but at this moment he looked somewhat disheveled. Because part of his spiritual body was suddenly obliterated, he let out a scream without any warning, and his whole body felt as if his bones had been removed, and he rolled around on the ground in pain. Someone from the organization happened to notice the commotion and rushed over to help him up, asking with concern and confusion, Mr. Li, what happened? What's wrong? It took Li Jiangguo a while to recover some strength. His eyes were bloodshot, his facial muscles twitched uncontrollably, and he roared ferociously, damn you, I'll kill you. His appearance was as if he had been completely consumed by hatred. His usual composure and elegance had vanished without a trace, leaving only a heart full of resentment. He clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white from the force, as if he were about to devour that damn guy alive at any moment. The person supporting him was startled by the sudden roar, their body trembling involuntarily. But they dared not ask any questions and could only carefully support Li Jiangguo, their eyes revealing a hint of fear. Li Jiangguo gritted his teeth and breathed heavily, the scene of his spiritual sea being erased replaying in his mind, and the killing intent in his heart surged like a raging tide. This time, he not only lost the spiritual body he had painstakingly cultivated, but also suffered a major setback in his carefully planned scheme. He secretly vowed that no matter the cost, he would make Baiye pay a terrible price. Returning to Baiye's side, after some introspection, he found the spiritual legacy left by Li Jiangguo. That was a large amount of spiritual energy, which remained in his mind at the moment, ready for him to consume or absorb at any time. Deep within his spiritual sea, three faint, indistinct figures slowly emerged. One of them, with a graceful figure, seemed to be surrounded by ethereal clouds. Every move she made seemed to be in harmony with the great principles of heaven and earth, displaying an extraordinary and otherworldly demeanor. The other one, with its frenzied aura and twisted, shifting form, seemed to be churning with endless, insane thoughts, as if it wanted to drag everything around it into an abyss of madness. The third figure had a refined and scholarly appearance, dressed in a plain-colored long robe with wide sleeves. He exuded a gentle, scholarly aura and seemed to be holding an ancient book in his hand, emanating a faint aura of righteousness. This is the sole defense mechanism that Baiye set up back in the cultivation world, based on the true spirits of his three avatars. He didn't use it much back in the cultivation world, but he never expected that he could still use it after reincarnating into this world. Immediately afterwards, Baiye began to clean up the battlefield. After Li Jiangguo's spirit died, T-19 was left with only its last breath. Baiye attempted to control it with the dream crystal but failed. Clearly, Li Jiangguo used extremely sophisticated methods, and his control over it took precedence over that of the dream crystal. Left with no other choice, Baiye's eyes narrowed, a cold glint flashed, and with a swift movement, the blade sliced directly across T-19's neck, warm blood spurting out, ending its life. Ding, you have defeated the instance mob Mutant T-19. LV-18 boss unit, gaining 6240 experience points. The remaining mutants, having been directly impacted by the T-19's psychic storm, were still howling in agony. Baiye's expression was calm, the sharp blade in his hand gleaming coldly as he sent them one by one on their final journey, ending their painful struggles in the world. As for the T-15, to be honest, Baiye didn't want to kill it. After all, it was considered a semi-successful experimental subject in Li Jiangguo's human experiments. Unlike other mutants, it was not ugly in appearance, but rather large in size and had a soldier-like murderous aura on its face. In addition, given his own formidable strength, he still has some use to Baiye. At this moment, the clamor subsided, leaving only the pervasive stench of blood and a scene of desolation in the entire dream space. Baiye stood alone in place, glancing at the only other living person in this dream besides himself. Feeling both physically and mentally exhausted, he could no longer hold on and immediately used the dream crystal to escape the dream world. Ding, congratulations to player Moonlit Sky for completing the dispatch mission, Strange Tales of the Abandoned Hospital. Main quest, find 8 pieces of evidence of human experimentation within 12 hours, completed. Successfully exit the current instance, completed. Hidden quest, find 3 investigators, completed. Send 3 investigators out of the instance, completed. Find the missing persons from the hospital and send them out, completed. Defeat boss T-19, completed. Find the key item for the next instance. Experiment transfer record, completed. Bonus points, survived an attack from an enemy exceeding the dungeon's difficulty limit, Li Jiangguo's spirit form, and killed them, completed. Note, this bonus item can provide a large number of points. If a player has reached the score cap, the extra points will be compensated with 1 or more treasure chests based on the contribution. Task rating S+. Basic rewards: 1000 EXP, 8 gold, 1 random F-rank treasure chest, right arrow final rewards. 7000 EXP, 56 gold, random F-rank treasure chest changed to F-rank eternal treasure chest. Bonus rewards: Dream Crystal allows entry into the current world at any time. Dungeon exit ticket allows exit from the dungeon. Rank F eternal treasure chest. Ding, player Moonlit Sky has achieved an S or higher rating in this world's dungeon. You may choose to stay in the dungeon or leave after this clear. You can also use dream crystals to enter this world at any time. The current time ratio between the Strange Tales world and Azure Star is 1:1. Ding, player Moonlight Wanderer has been detected to have killed greater or equal to 5 elite-level units, earning the title Elite Killer. Ding, player Moonlit Sky has killed greater or equal to 3 boss-level units, earning the title Boss Slayer. After Baiye left the dream world, she appeared in the reality of St. Mary's Hospital in the Strange Tales world. When the system notification that the task was completed sounded in his mind, he immediately requested to exit the current world. His consciousness instantly returned to the Blue Star. Baiye slowly opened his eyes, and exhaustion washed over him like a tidal wave. After all that fighting, his mental strength had already dropped below 30%. What Li Jiangguo said earlier was actually correct. He could no longer unleash that strike imbued with the power of the heaven-shattering blade. Old Baiye didn't dare to gamble otherwise. If the other side launched even one more physical attack, he would have had to run away on the spot. Unfortunately, the other party not only fooled him, but also revealed many interesting secrets to him, and even tried to possess him in the end, resulting in a spiritual entity being left behind in his spiritual sea. However, Baiye was truly exhausted at that moment. So the moment he returned to his room, he didn't care about anything else, pulled the covers over himself and fell into a deep sleep. Meanwhile, a world of strange and bizarre events unfolds. Inside the Special Investigation Bureau, Lao Zhang, Chen Yuxin, and Liu Ming were sitting around an office. Ahead of them stood a valiant and extraordinary man, his posture as upright as a pine tree, exuding a fierce aura of someone who had been through many battles, making him look extremely formidable. This person is Chu Xingfeng, the captain of an investigation team at the Jianghai branch of the Special Investigation Bureau, and also Lao Zhang's superior. The group reported the details of the mission to Chu Xingfeng. After listening, he looked curious and asked, "How does the strength of this Mr. Bai you mentioned compare to the elites of our second team?" Old Zhang pondered for a moment, then answered truthfully. "In terms of raw strength alone, Mr. Bai is probably no match for our team's elite investigators. But if it were a life-or-death struggle, I believe that in a one-on-one duel, apart from you, Captain, all the other team members would be at risk of death." The atmosphere froze instantly upon hearing this, but the captain didn't seem to care about Lao Zhang's words. Instead, he looked eager to try. "Wow, that's strong. I guess I'll have to ask him for some pointers someday if I get the chance." Upon hearing this, the group was speechless. Their captain was good in every way except that he was too much of a battle maniac. He couldn't stand not fighting for a day. It's understandable that they were interested to hear that they had encountered someone as formidable as Baiye. After muttering something, Chu Xingfeng calmly waved his hand, indicating they could leave, but added at the end, "Your contributions to this mission are enough to exchange for another bottle of gene enhancement potion at the station. In a while, Xiao Chen should be promoted to a full-fledged investigator." After the others left, a woman wearing glasses walked lightly into the office and handed a stack of documents to the team leader. The captain took the file and slowly flipped through it. When he saw one of the contents, he couldn't help but murmur, "An orphan, and one of the experimental subjects captured from St. Mary's Hospital 3 years ago. Azure Star." After returning to his room, Baiye slept from the afternoon until the next morning, barely recovering from his fatigue before beginning to review his gains. First of all, experience points are still completely useless to him right now. This time he killed a total of 11 level 11 mutants, 9 level 12 mutants, and 6 level 13 mutants. 2 level 15 elite monsters, 1 level 18 boss, plus the experience from killing Li Jiangguo's spirit form and the experience from completing the quest. In total, that's 29,800, nearly 30,000 experience points. If I were a player who leveled up using experience points, I would have accumulated enough to level up 7 or 8 levels directly. Unfortunately, before reaching Tier 1 and unlocking the system's lottery, all that experience will just sit there gathering dust on the panel. Then, in terms of money, Bai Yeguang received 56 gold coins from the mission rewards alone. Even if he didn't sell the crystals he obtained in the dungeon, this money would be enough to support him for a while. And then, the remaining dream crystals, dungeon exit tickets, and 2 eternal treasure chests are all extremely valuable treasures, especially the dream crystal. After a whole day of exploration, Baiye finally gained a basic understanding of the effects of this thing and what it meant. It turns out that the effect it describes as controlling everything in a dream is not just limited to manipulating the creatures and environment within it, but also involves modifying the creatures and environment. The reason why that old B** D Li Jiangguo cares so much about this dream crystal is that he wants to modify the functions of living beings to make experimental subjects like the T-15 even more perfect. Originally, T-15, who possessed the ability to metallize, already had great potential. As a special ability at the extraordinary level, this ability itself was equivalent to a potential level of 3 or higher. However, with the transformation of the Dream Core, it still has the potential to go even further, and its potential will then be more than just Tier 3. 4th Order and 5th Order are both possible. However, to modify the T-15 using the Dream Crystal, a substance called Dream Energy is also needed. This kind of Dream Energy is very special. It It can only be generated slowly within the dream itself, or by traveling to other dreams and collecting energy from there. Of course, since Baiye can't go to other dreams right now, she can only rely on the St. Mary's Hospital dream to slowly grow. Besides that, Baiye also figured out the conditions for the evolution of Dream Crystal. It turns out that this thing also needs dream energy to evolve. If there is enough time, this thing doesn't need any external catalysis at all. It can be self-sufficient simply by the energy generated by St. Mary's Hospital. Unfortunately, this process takes a very long time. So if Baiye wants it to evolve faster, she still needs to find a way to see if she can steal some dream energy from other dreams. However, on a sudden whim, Baiye realized that the cores inside those mutant bodies were surprisingly similar to the dream crystal. And since they happen to be products of dreams, could it be that the energy within their cores is simply dream energy? So Baiye simply conducted an experiment, directly throwing out the core of a mutant and having it consumed by the T-15. As he expected, after the T-15 consumed the core from the level 11 mutant, its strength and constitution attributes suddenly increased slightly, and the metallic texture on its surface appeared to become increasingly lustrous. Baiye's eyes lit up. He no longer cared that these things could be sold for money and handed over the cores of the other level 11 mutants to T-15 to swallow. After consuming 11 cores, T-15's momentum grew stronger and stronger, and its level directly broke through to LV-17, with a tendency to become even stronger. However, it will take some time for the T-15 to absorb this energy. Once it has fully digested it, it will probably become a level 18 boss unit, just like the T-19. Speaking of T-19, Baiye suddenly took out the core he had extracted from its body. Compared to the cores of other mutants, this core was larger, with purple light flowing across its surface, making it look exceptionally mysterious. Moreover, Baiye discovered that this thing actually contained item information. Item, Superpower Crystal Core. Rank First Rank. Quality Excellent. Type Special Item. Recommended Profession None. Use Requirements. Mental Resistance 39. Item Description. The core of a superhuman's ability formed from the essence condensed after death. Item Attributes. Spirit +5, Constitution +1, Spirit Reserve 1800, Weight Capacity 0.2, approx. 0.5 kg, Durability 600. Effect 1, Mental Recovery, active. By manipulating this special ability crystal core, you can accelerate the recovery of mental energy. You can also absorb the mental energy stored within the crystal core. Mental energy is automatically restored at a rate of 1 point every 5 seconds. Effect 2. Ability Awakening, special. Those who consume this ability crystal core have a certain probability of acquiring the original owner's ability. If the consumer has already awakened a similar skill, there is a certain probability that the ability will undergo a second awakening. Well, a special ability crystal core, and it even has a chance to grant someone a mental ability. It's important to know that the game Origins has been running for nearly 200 years. Almost everyone agrees that while the potential of supernatural abilities isn't very high, their rate of growth is almost unparalleled. Compared to the cultivation system that requires years or even decades of practice, the game world where you level up by killing monsters and gaining meager experience is quite different. Once a superpower awakens, the speed at which it grows stronger is like a sow on hormones. Its strength increases exponentially. Even without much cultivation, one can easily become a powerful figure in just a few years. Therefore, even though many people know that the combat power of a superpower system is not outstanding at the same level, and the lifespan is almost at the bottom at the same rank, in order to become stronger, many people still want to obtain the power of a superpower system through various means. In other words, if Baiye were to put this thing up for auction, it would almost certainly bring him unimaginable profits. However, Baiye naturally wouldn't sell it, even though he wasn't interested in superpower systems and felt that this power had some dubious origins. But at least it can be used as a source of mental energy. After all, Baiye's current use of sword intent, saber intent, sword momentum, saber momentum, or his own priest skills all consume a lot of mental energy. In addition, the use of dream crystals and the alchemy notebook also require a large amount of spirit points to support them. Often, the reason why people don't dare to go all out is because they don't have enough mental energy and their endurance isn't long enough. If he had possessed this weapon when he fought Li Jiangguo, he wouldn't have needed to waste words with him. With a few strikes of heavenly swaying blade force, slashing blade intent, and divine firmament slash, he could have carried him away on the spot. After putting away the superpower crystal core, Baiye tried again to see if he could use the dream crystal to directly transfer T15 from the dream of St. Mary's Hospital to the reality of Tianlin Star. I've discovered that this unconventional tactic actually works. However, after the other party came into reality, the dream crystal's control over it greatly decreased, and as time went on, there were signs that it was breaking free of control. Baiye reacted quickly and retrieved it. If the other party really broke free from control and caused a ruckus in his apartment, not only would the house left to them by their adoptive parents be completely destroyed, but he might even be directly handcuffed and confined to a dark room by the authorities to reflect on his actions. It seems he still needs to find another opportunity to exert control over the T15, such as the soul-planting technique he obtained from an evil cultivation sect in the cultivation world. The soul-planting technique is an evil method in the cultivation world that relies solely on spiritual power to plant one's own will on a target that has no power to resist. When Baiye was training outside, he encountered an evil cultivator who used this evil method to control righteous cultivators. After killing the evil cultivator, he found this method quite interesting. Unfortunately, he couldn't find the manual for this secret technique on the other person, nor did he witness the other person performing it. So he wandered over to the library of that heretical cultivator's sect and borrowed the original copy of the soul-planting technique. Through his own Taoist spiritual wisdom, he completely removed the part of the soul-seeding technique that could make others' personalities more evil, turning it into a pure soul control technique. However, this modified soul-planting technique requires that the target of Baiye's soul-planting does not resist, which is easily achieved through the dream crystal. Secondly, Baiye's mental strength must naturally be higher than the mental resistance of the person being manipulated, otherwise he might break free from control if he's not careful. With his current mental strength, he naturally doesn't have the same mental resistance as the T15, so he can only wait until he reaches the first level to see if he can completely control it. Then through the dream crystal, I can become a summoner myself. However, besides summoning the T15 from the dream through the dream crystal, Baiye cannot take other items out, nor can she directly put things into it. Unless Baiye moves it multiple times using her inventory, it can barely be considered a spatial item with an extremely large area. However, this process of repeatedly taking things out consumes a lot of mental energy. After testing the dream crystal's abilities, Baiye took a relaxing bath and then opened both eternal treasure chests. His luck wasn't as good as last time, but it wasn't too bad either. Both items were Tier 1 perfect quality equipment. Baiye found the first perfect quality item quite interesting, especially since it was one of the items he needed in his plans. Tool, 1000 Faces. Rank, Tier 1 can be upgraded. Quality perfect. Nature Mask. Recommended classes, Rogue Illusionist. Usage requirements, Mental Resistance 40. Item description. A mask formed by the fusion of ancient disguise techniques and the spirit of illusion born from an interdimensional rift. It can blur the user's form and create any mimicry, allowing the user to temporarily assume the appearance of the person being imitated. Item attributes: Agility +5, Spirit +6, Constitution +1, Spirit Resistance -5, Charisma +15, Weight 0.08, approx. 200 G, Durability 1200. Effect 1, Mimicry active, consumes 30 points of spirit power. Perfectly replicates the appearance of a target observed within the field of vision, including physique and basic temperament. Not limited to humans, but overall size remains unchanged. Maintains the replica by consuming 1 point of spirit power per minute. Effect 2, Appearance theft. Active, consumes at least 50 points of mental energy. Uses a mask to forcibly strip the target of their current appearance, abilities, memories, etc. After wearing the mask. The wearer can completely transform into the current character. The duration depends on the mental strength and resistance of the target and the user. The victim enters a 12-hour facial abjection state, unable to display true expressions. Effect 3. Wheel of Illusion, active, consumes at least 50 spirit points. Actively reduces one's presence. The more spirit points invested, the lower the presence, up to a level where one can stand right in front of the target without being detected, depending on the target's perception attribute. Note 1. The mask will continuously absorb moonlight energy to repair its durability. The stronger the moonlight, the higher the repair efficiency. Note 2. Mask evolution requires illusionary attribute energy. After seeing the mask's effect, Baiye was pleasantly surprised. He took out the faceless mask, which was as thin as a cicada's wing and had a wonderful texture from the treasure chest, marveled at it, and began to test it. First, he constructed a character image in his mind. Then, under his control, the mask turned into liquid and covered his body. In an instant, he transformed from a handsome young man over 1.8 meters tall into a hunchbacked, crookedly grinning Liu Neng. Immediately afterwards, he changed the liquid covering his face again, making his facial features more defined and adding a blue-patterned half-face mask. He looked exactly like Yulwa from Balala the Fairies. Then anime characters appeared one after another. Naruto with his spiky hair, Luffy with a goofy grin, and the handsome bald guy with dead fish eyes. Even the lovable Xing the lewd-looking bikini-bottom General Huang Mayan, can be imitated as the big bad wolf. It's a pity that he can't even imitate the clothes. Otherwise, he could enjoy the joy of being a cosplayer almost every day. The reason why Baiye chose to play solo twice in the past was not because he insisted on being a lone wolf or disliked cooperating with others. The main advantage is that during missions, players are less constrained by the order of the planet Tianlin. You never know what kind of personalities the teammates the game system matches you with will have. If you offend someone in a dungeon or acquire something valuable that attracts unwanted attention, and your appearance is leaked, it's very easy for someone to find you in real life and seek revenge. Before he had the ability to protect his identity, Baiye wasn't interested in multiplayer matchmaking, which is why he did 2 solo matchmaking sessions. Now that we have this personalized feature, I can try out multi-person matchmaking. As for the second item, Resurrection Coin. Rank first rank. Quality perfect. Nature special. Recommended profession none. Usage requirements, player level less or equal to 20. Item description. This item is an improved version of Dungeon Fighter Online from the game Origins. Item attributes none. Effect, revival active after binding a resurrection coin, you can hide it anywhere. Whether you die on Azure Star or during a mission, you can be perfectly resurrected from the resurrection coin. Note, resurrection coins will not work for deaths caused by certain high-level cells. After seeing the effect of the resurrection coin, Baiye's pupils suddenly contracted. It's a resurrection coin, although this thing doesn't even have any item attributes and it only has one item effect, but even this single effect is ridiculously over the top. In other words, with this thing, I'll have a life-saving guarantee whether in reality or exploring dungeons. Can we now relax and have fun without worry? Woohoo! Awesome! After inspecting the spoils, Baiye suddenly realized that it was already the evening of the second day, and Su Li was only 1 day away from returning. Taking advantage of the time before the other party returned, Baiye went to Xinghua bookstore again on the morning of the third day and bought back the remaining 3 books in the 9 chapters of Elements series. Baiye originally planned to spend the afternoon reading, as usual, and then prepare dinner and wait for Su Li to return when it was almost time. But at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the house's magical radio suddenly emitted a sharp and urgent warning tone, breaking the afternoon's tranquility. Immediately afterwards, a calm and authoritative voice came from inside. Attention all residents of Jiangbei City, this station has an important announcement to make. At 2:37 p.m. today, a portal appeared in the southern part of Pingjiang District, Jiangbei City. Due to our bureau's failure to arrive in time to establish a defensive line, some monsters from that world entered our world. Following an emergency investigation and analysis by relevant departments, these monsters number approximately 1,000, are only at the first tier of strength, possess a high degree of camouflage, are adept at mimicking human forms and behaviors, and typically choose to be active at night, making them highly stealthy and dangerous. Hereby, the authorities solemnly remind the residents of Pingjiang District to minimize going out at night in order to ensure their own safety. If you need to meet with someone, be sure to show your game ID to them so that they can be effectively identified. Please inform each other, remain vigilant, and actively cooperate with relevant departments to jointly maintain the safety and stability of the city. The Magic Broadcasting System is a facility that the Star Dragon Kingdom officially requires every household to be equipped with, and it is installed free of charge by the government. The purpose is to promptly alert the public in the event of an emergency, thus avoiding unnecessary trouble. Upon hearing this notification, Baiye's expression turned serious. Interdimensional invasion. This is a term that is not unfamiliar to the people of the Blue Planet. After all, in the many years before his memories awakened, he had witnessed quite a few scenes of otherworldly invasions. Back then, he became an orphan on the battlefield during an invasion from another world, and was later fortunate enough to be adopted by Su Li's parents. Since then, Jiangbei City has experienced several invasions, but fortunately none of them were large-scale and all were successfully blocked by official players. But this time was different. His apartment and Su Lei's school were both in Pingjiang district. Su Li usually walked to school, passing through a field in the middle of the city with few people. His mind raced, and he suddenly remembered that the group activities organized by Jiangbei No. 1 Middle School in previous years always ended around 7:30 p.m. In other words, by the time Su Li finished the dungeon and started walking back, it would definitely be completely dark. The thought of those camouflaged monsters lurking in the darkness, waiting to harm people, is unbearable. Even with today's advanced city surveillance systems, once a monster is detected injuring someone, an entire intelligent mechanical force will arrive at the scene within 3 minutes. But what if Su Li can't last 3 minutes? Baiye clicked his tongue. Looks like I still have to go to school and pick up that cheapskate sister. Around 7 o'clock, Baiye got up and put on 1,000 faces, activating Effect 3, which slightly reduced his presence. Then, he pushed open the door and embarked on the road to Jiangbei No. 1 Middle School. Because of the afternoon's announcement about the invasion of otherworldly monsters, the streets were now filled with a deathly silence. The usually bustling streets were now as deserted as an abandoned ghost town. Only the magic lamps by the roadside emitted a faint, flickering light, attempting to tear a sliver of light through the heavy gloom. Baiye walked steadily through the almost suffocatingly quiet streets. As he walked to the most secluded section of the road on his way to school, a feeling of being watched, like thorns in his back, crept up his spine. Baiye's heart tightened, instantly recalling the notification from that afternoon. He couldn't help but curse inwardly. Damn it, will this lousy mask even work? Wasn't the plan to minimize my presence? How can I keep running into these things just by going out? 1,000 faces for 1,000 people, isn't it a slight reduction in presence? Is it my fault? He sighed and grumbled. So, it seems that even if handsome guys like us try to lower our profile, we're still dazzling. With his keen senses, Baiye judged that the aura of the spy was not too strong, at least within his ability to deal with. After a moment's thought, he decided to lure the guy hiding in the shadows to that sparsely populated field and then summon his T-15 to take him out. If he's caught on camera by CCTV afterwards and the police ask him about it, he'll say he learned a summoning technique. But before he could act, a clear and authoritative shout pierced the night sky. How dare these evil spirits from the outside world wreak havoc here? Following the sound, Baiye saw a group of figures surging towards him like a black tide in the distant farmland. Upon closer inspection, they turned out to be a group of enormous mechanical dogs, with the lead one being almost the size of a small car. With strong and powerful limbs, each step he took left a shallow footprint on the ground. Its metallic shell gleamed with a cold luster, reflecting an eerie light under the illumination of the magic lamp. Metal and magical runes intertwine, outlining intricate and mysterious patterns that showcase the perfect fusion of technology and magic. Surprisingly, the coating on this enormous creature is a pink and white color scheme, which looks both abrupt and strangely endearing in this somewhat tense atmosphere. Following behind it was a group of mechanical dogs, each the size of an African lion, all in the same pink and white color scheme. The metal parts on their bodies made a crisp clanging sound as they ran, as if playing a unique war song. Their eyes gleamed with a ghostly blue light, like deep, icy pools exuding a chilling killing intent. The mechanical dogs' gears and chains meshed together, propelling them forward at high speeds. Their cyberpunk-style appearance added to their mysterious and dangerous aura in the night. Seeing that things were going badly, the stalkers behind them quickly revealed their true forms. It was a monster with an extremely slender figure, about twice the height of an average person, with delicate yet powerful limbs like a taut bowstring. Its skin was a mottled grayish green, like moss growing on an old wall, exuding an eerie aura. Its head was long and narrow, and its ears, like sharp bat wings, trembled slightly, as if trying to catch every subtle movement around it. A pair of eyes gleamed with a chilling red light, like two burning will-o'-the-wisps radiating a menacing aura. Its mouth gaped open, revealing 2 rows of sharp, jagged fangs, each gleaming with a cold metallic luster, as if it could easily tear apart anything that stood in its way. After the monster materialized, it turned and ran without looking back, moving with ghostly speed, leaving a blurry afterimage in the street. Behind them, a dozen smaller alchemical mechanical dogs followed closely, their metal parts clanging together with a sharp, jarring sound that was particularly jarring in the quiet night. The larger mechanical dog at the head of the pack remained as steady as an old dog, standing still like a general commanding from the rear. The next second, the several alchemical mechanical dogs in front suddenly took flight. It turns out that alchemists had cleverly installed countless nitrogen flame nozzles to support flight in the gaps between the armor covering their bodies. Blue flames shot out from the nozzles with a whooshing sound, and the powerful thrust propelled the mechanical dogs to accelerate instantly. sending them hurtling towards the monster like cannonballs. With the acceleration from nitrogen flight, the monster was quickly caught up and surrounded. Several flying mechanical dogs circled in the air, blocking the monster's front, while the rest flanked it from the ground in a fan shape, surrounding the monster in the middle. The monster, trapped in the encirclement, let out an angry and fearful roar. It kept turning its head, warily watching the mechanical dogs around it, its limbs slightly bent, ready to retaliate at any moment. But it was clear that its situation was extremely precarious, and a tense atmosphere filled the air, ready to erupt at any moment. Suddenly, the sweet, girlish voice rang out again. Tear it to pieces. Her voice, like a military order, instantly broke the stalemate. Like soldiers receiving a signal to charge, more than a dozen alchemical mechanical dogs swarmed forward, rushing towards the monster from all directions and completely engulfing it in a pinkish-white metallic wave. It must be said that this monster is indeed of a very high level, reaching level 18, and its strength is extremely astonishing. With a flash, it swung its thick arm, and one of the leading alchemical mechanical dogs was struck by lightning, flying away like a kite with a broken string with a bang. However, despite its immense strength, this monster was extremely inept at controlling the battle. It was only focused on breaking free of the encirclement, desperately rushing out of the circle, completely distracted. In this chaotic and disorganized response, the dozen or so alchemical mechanical dogs gradually gained the upper hand. They cooperated with each other. Some attracted the monster's attention from the front, then opened their mouths to bite its arms and legs, trying to restrain its movements. Others seized the opportunity to attack from the side or behind, their sharp metal teeth biting into the monster's body and tearing off chunks of grayish-green flesh. Overwhelmed by the situation, the monster sustained more and more wounds, and thick, dark green blood gushed out, staining the ground a bizarre color. As the battle continued, the monster's resistance became increasingly feeble. Finally, under the relentless attacks of more than a dozen alchemical mechanical dogs, it could no longer hold on, and its massive body crashed to the ground. The mechanical dogs didn't stop there, they continued to tear and bite. Soon, the once majestic monster was torn to pieces and scattered on the ground, leaving a scene of utter chaos. After the battle, the girl commented with satisfaction. "Not bad, you easily soloed a level 18 monster, as expected of me." However, another voice suddenly rang out, instantly extinguishing her good mood like a bucket of cold water. "This fighting style is so outdated. It's 22-22 already, and you're leading a bunch of mechanical dogs. Why don't you just equip them with machine guns or shoulder cannons and unleash a barrage of fire? Wouldn't that have easily solved the problem?" The lead mechanical dog seemed to understand human speech. It suddenly turned its head and glared angrily at Baiye, its mechanical parts creaking as if venting its dissatisfaction. "What do you know? Look where you are. This is the Star Dragon Kingdom, where gun and ammunition control is extremely strict. If I dared to put these things on a mechanical dog and fire it in the city, I'd be locked up in jail the next day." The moment the girl controlling the mechanical dog saw Baiye's face clearly, she exclaimed in astonishment, "It's you."